Everybody, and welcome. We're going to start our work session celebrating Poetry and Jazz Month with some students from Barbara Ingram School for the Arts reading some of their very own poetry. The first person I would like to invite to the podium here to read her poetry is Brianna Myers. This is her first appearance before the City Council to share. So please come to the podium and share with us your work.
This is just a haiku series that I wrote. Modern Grecian Love. I cried out when you left, wept many days after when I heard your voice floating on the wind. Your absence spoke, your thoughtless laughing opposed my soft sobs and silence. I shunned my longing for you, building barricades to slow the burning ache, where arms had enveloped arms and caught my tears. They ran unburdened in streams down my face, formed ponds. I was echo, and you, my Narcissus, we are oblivious, left yearning forever.
Very nice, thank you. Kate Brown, I'm sorry, you were here last year. This is your third time before the City Council. Thank you. And haiku is what, 575?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's Mrs. Stauffer, my English teacher. I have her to thank for that. The next person to share with us is Cameron Grosh, sorry about that. Please share. Cameron has also been here multiple times with us.
My poem is an I Am Here assignment that we had in class, and it's just basically an assignment that was a moment that was special to us that signified when we actually felt like we were alive and just in one with the earth. So, soft summer clarity. Two wooden posts stand guard, cracked in all the right places. She lies in between them, the brightest treasure of the backyard. A simple child humming, dream on, to the blue sky, turn night sky, turn bedtime. The hammock cups her back and ankles and sways her slowly, a lull a chasm deep, keeping her still. Soft summer heat baking the green grass pale, with blue jays twittering as bees pollinate budding sunflowers. She giggles with the trees as the stars push clouds away, so that they may guide the fireflies into her impatient palms that earlier had gripped handlebars so fiercely they'd become white bubbled blisters. Her eyes become a galaxy when she sees, for the first time, what a quiet night can do for constellations. And she knows that words are merely descriptions for truth, and that watching the sky blush a sweet pink as it goes to bed, that so must she, but she doesn't want to. She cannot sleep tonight when everything is so clear.
Thank you. And Caitlin Lee Hendricks, this is your first time here,
Yes.
right? Please share.
Okay. I did not write this for an assignment. I wrote this, my friend was recently diagnosed with a pretty serious medical issue, which I have been forced to kind of see all sides of him that I didn't expect to see through all of this. And this is in response to Sylvia Plath's poem, You're, and this is called He Is. A cliche. He grins at girls' hair, laced with snowflakes. Hot chocolate steam embracing chilled faces, whipped cream forming frosted winter trees along a toasty mug, a simile. He's like a French horn, twisted in every way, unsure of which way to go, but determined for a beautiful outcome, a hyperbole. A mosaic. A million tiny, different colored pieces fitting to make something whole. Something unique. Something artistic. Something different, an oxymoron. A thriving contradiction. He's deceptively honest, awfully good, a loud whisper, an inconspicuous absence, a metaphor. He's a shot of curiosity with a bittersweet aftertaste. He's skating thumbs on frigid, icy hands, imagery. Tangled veins with a quick pulse, trying to keep pace, the blood pumping, a constant ticking inner metronome repetition. He is worth so much. He is worth so much more. He is worth so much more than these labels we insist on giving him.
very impressed you had that whole poem memorized. And I want to acknowledge your teacher, Katie McNew. Is she here with you today?
She is not.
Okay, well, thank you to her for having you guys here and teaching you. I have something a little here to share with you. Thank you for coming all the way here. From the school. Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good job. Keep up the good work. What grade are you guys in?
11.
Juniors here.
10. Wow, very nice. Well, I'm sure we'll have you back.
Yes.
You have a couple more years. Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day. That's always a nice way to start a council meeting. The preliminary agenda is our next item, and we'll go through that. The clerk has distributed a couple revised purchase information sheets, so we'll look at those when we get to them. Councilmember Nye, you have the invocation next week. Just to review our meeting schedule for May, we'll have our work sessions on the 5th, the 12th, and the 19th at 4 o'clock. And our regular session is Tuesday, May 26th at 7 p.m. Let's see. We do have public hearings. May the 12th is our budget hearing. So that'll be after our work session, 7 p.m. The tax rate and budget hearing will be occurring at that time. Of course, the council has much more work to do on the budget, so stay tuned. Do want to point out that we have a budget work session next Tuesday as well at 4 o'clock. I forgot to mention it at the top of the preliminary agenda, but we are having a work session at 4 to discuss the budget, followed by our 7 o'clock regular session next week. Any questions about the schedule? On the consent agenda, we have the application for the permit for the Blues Prelude, as well as for the Blues Fest itself, and the Blues Club. Basically, all of the items 1 through 4 having to do with, 1 through 3 having to do with the Blues Fest. We do have representatives here. If anyone has questions about those, any questions about that? Those 3 items related to the Blues Fest. Moving on, number 4 is the permit and open container exemption for the Maryland Theater Wine Downs. These will be for May 8th, June 5th, July 17th, August 21st, September 25th, and October 16th. Those will be the Wine Down Fridays. There's also an application, permit, and open container exemption for the USMH graduation, which occurs on May 19th. Any questions about what's on the consent agenda? All right, under the Department of Utilities, we have, number 1 is the 4 transformers. That's the one where you received an updated sheet, is that correct?
More detailed explanation.
So there's a more detailed explanation on this revised sheet. Any questions on the transformers? Number 2 is the water software upgrade. Any question on that? Moving on to unfinished business. Oh, did I?
Consent.
Where's that? Oh, it's not on the consent agenda. We also received that from the clerk. Thank you for clarifying that. This is a request by the police department for a continuity of operations plan, so we can put this on the consent agenda. Is that the request? Any objections to putting this on the consent agenda?
Well, we haven't been briefed on this.
Chief is here. If you have any questions, he can.
Well, I guess I, for one, would like to know what it is. and
Okay.
what's
Chief,
happening.
do you mind coming up for a minute?
Hi.
Tell us about the coop.
Sure. Continuity of operations plan. It's one of our objectives this year to get done at the police department, which is to help sustain our department in the event that something were to happen to the building. Catastrophic, maybe a rail car has a gas leak or something like that. We need to leave the police department. How do we do that? We have a lot of functions within that police department, from IT to a lab to regular patrol operations. Where do we go? What do we pre-stage in that area? And then just all the steps that kind of go into a continuity of operations plan. So this is a first for us. We've had some, well, we'll just put it this way. This will be a first for us to have a nice formal plan for continuity of operations to cover a host of events that could happen to our department. And this isn't dealing with, this is not dealing with an event like in the street or a riot or anything like that. This is just simply continuity of operations for the building. Should something fire, flood, some sort of damage to that building, where do we go? So we set out to do this internally about a year or so ago and didn't get very far with it. We reached out to some vendors. The vendor that we selected is a vendor that has some experience with this. They did several COOP plans for the county government in different departments, and so they have some experience working in Washington County. We met with them and feel comfortable with their plan, that it covers everything that we're looking for. And we did competitively bid it, and they were the low bid, so that's where we are.
Any questions?
No problem. I move we put this as part of our budget considerations. It's general fund. Why are we approving this in 1 week?
Well, I think because the police department, the nature of their business and the,
Well, they haven't had one for forever, and we're talking about
when you need one is
budget cuts.
when you're gonna need one, though. I think,
Well,
I guess that's
I would
the-
add that this is part of our, it's coming out of our current general operating budget for FY15. This is, we have monies budgeted for this, and so we originally were gonna get some software. We're able to get a drastic reduction in the software package that we were looking to do, and it freed up money to move this forward on our to-do list. So there is current general fund money for this.
How long will it take to get it done?
I'm going to give ourselves about 6 months. My goal is to have it done by the end of the year. I believe we can hit that goal.
I mean, I'm familiar with this. I think I wrote ours in Myersville, but we lean pretty heavily on Frederick County. And I guess my question is, in Frederick County, in that particular instance, they sort of wrote an umbrella document that then all the municipalities sort of, wrote their respective portions into that. Is that how you envision this working as well? Does Washington County's Emergency Services Division already have one for a countywide effort?
I would think of them as two different things. An emergency operations plan, it is what the county does have in place, and our emergency operations plan is similar to that. This is a continuity of operations plan, just dealing with the physical building and the
That's right. Where
and
do
the
you go
functions within it.
after building one fails? Where do you go next? And,
Right.
And if person one fails, who's person two next, et cetera. So yeah,
That's it.
And I guess that's my
Succession
question
plan.
is, will it be tied then into the county's co-op?
I think it would be consistent with it.
Okay.
But I would say that the emergency operations manual is a big red book they have at the 911 center.
Right.
And that covers,
Right, that's the
sort of
EOP that covers all bodies under one single unit of.
right, that deals more with handling an event or an incident that happens to a disaster, that sort of thing. But individual buildings, how do you handle those functions? That's more of the continuity of operations that we're talking about here. So when the county did it, each one of their different divisions set off to do this, and then they brought them together under more of a consistent document. They don't lean on one another. They really are standalone documents.
And I don't recall now, because I think we did ours, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. So, time frame, I mean, I hear Marty's point that, add this into the budget, but I thought that the EOP, when it was updated 2 or 3 years ago, that that the co-op came out sort of shortly thereafter, and I don't know if there was some state requirement at that time that jurisdictions write and, draft and adopt these plans. I mean, for me, I think you have to, because I almost feel like,
Well,
We're
again,
a
we
little behind.
did, the city adopted, before I became chief, the city adopted the county's emergency operations
Okay.
plan, and we designated the fire chief to be the head of emergency operations for the city, for if a disaster were to come through the town. And that model deals with how do you deal with that flood, that tornado, that fire,
so there's
that
nothing out
major
there
event. But
saying the co-op is due by date X.
No,
Okay.
that's a different project than this one. This one deals with how do you deal with your building individually.
Right,
How
I
do you
thought they
keep
both
your
had
functions running?
a, hey, jurisdiction X, you need to do this by.
Not that I'm familiar with.
This is more
no.
of an internal document for our operations,
Yes,
not how we're gonna work with other operations throughout the county if there was a disaster that.
right,
Right.
this
Would
just
occur in
deals
the community.
specifically with how
I
do you.
thought they
how
both
do
came
you-
out about the same time, and they both had sort of a similar time frame of adoption. But
Not familiar with it.
How do you keep this from being just put on a shelf?
That's a good
Because
point,
that's what often happens in my experience with these sorts of things.
right? You have to train for it. I think we have to put ourselves through the exercises, just like a school would run a fire drill. It starts with something as simple as a fire drill. If you have to leave for 10 minutes and come back, what do? A police station just can't totally abandon. Somebody has to stay on post and guard what's the evidence locker and things like that. So it starts off as simple as that, and then it would move into, if you need to be away for one operational period of maybe 12 hours or maybe 12 days or longer. So where do you move to? How do you keep your operations going? It's a vital service. And then how do you transition back into the building where you are? So that's what the document will cover. So I think running exercises is going to be the answer to that. We did talk to the vendor about that. How do we make this live? And they did say you do have to train it, yet you have to run the drills.
Yeah, and you also need to have a hard copy as well. It's one of the first things that can go down is your electronic system.
Absolutely.
So you need to have
In which
those
case you would want it,
old-fashioned
you
weird
would want it
things
on the
called a
shelf
hard
in that
copy.
case.
Huh?
I said in that case you would want it on the shelf.
That's what I said.
Sure, Don?
This brings to mind another issue. Suppose some of those things that you said at the beginning of your comments, a train engine fell on that building and has basically destroyed it. Is it adequately insured that it could be rebuilt? Or does the city have sufficient insurance on that building? Or do you know?
I think those are going to be questions for Kevin DeHaven. I'll draft him into that.
Okay, well,
I'll trust him on
if you
that.
could- If you just send us an email and let us know.
I'll certainly check on that,
Appreciate
yeah.
that, because if these things are being thought about seriously, that's an issue that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
thought about seriously, and it's easy to see where an engine could fall and do some pretty serious damage.
Yes, absolutely. We've had gas leaks nearby the building before. We've actually had a train leaking some fumes maybe 20 years ago over on the rail yard, and all those things can threaten us. You don't think about those things unless you sit down and do it. So it really is about identifying the essential functions of every job, from mine all the way down to the front desk. And then what tools do you need to do that job? Who's your succession plan, and then train to those exercises. So our building has lots of different functions just within the police department. The lab is the best example. The evidence locker is a great example. What do you do with that? When you do leave, you have to leave somebody behind. So it's just working through all those things and identifying what everybody's essential tools are and their functions, having a go bag of your hard copies. What do you need to take with you to the next location? If we say the drill is on now, you need to move. Where do we move to? What do you take? And putting ourselves through that pace. I think it's going to be good for the department, to a preparedness level for the department that we haven't been at before. And it's been something that I've been looking to do for the last year or so.
I meant the shelf in the backup location.
Right. Of course.
Before you leave, I want to say something completely different. It's been a rough couple of weeks for the police department, and I want to compliment you and everybody who has handled the situation precisely right. You've done Hagerstown proud, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So there are no objections to putting this item on the consent agenda?
I object.
You
Part of the
object?
budget.
Well,
So we'll put
We
it
can,
on-
we can just
not
put
the
it on,
consent agenda.
New business.
yeah, we'll just put it under new business, and you can vote against it. How's that, Marty? Okay. So it will be. Item A under, thank you, Chief. Item A under unfinished business is amendment to the Code of Ethics that we discussed previously. Any questions on that? Approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 10 to revise the definition of quorum for boards, commissions, and authorities, also discussed previously. Any questions about that one? We also have an introduction of an ordinance amendments to Chapter 117 regarding trash. There's a memo in your preliminary agenda packet that seeks to clarify the direction that council gave regarding this. So has everyone had a chance to look at that and have any questions about that? So the idea is we're gonna remove any conflicts between the two code provisions, and specifically the fine amount and to whom a fine may be issued are clarified, and also the ability of staff to provide immediate relief to a neighborhood by removing trash set out on an incorrect day and charging a fee for removal are in that language. The amount of the fee will be included in the annual fee schedule as part of the budget adoption process. Any questions on that one? Item B under new business will be the introduction of an ordinance for 278 South Prospect, also discussed previously. Any questions on that one? Item C is the approval of an exemption for Chapter 155 noise. There's a memo from our city clerk about that. Any questions about that? No? Item D is the approval of the budget transfer to the citywide down payment and rehab program. We also discussed this at a previous work session. Any questions on that? Item E, rain insurance for the Western Maryland Blues Fest. Any questions on that? And we'll add one item to the new business. Item F will be the coop for HPD. All right, any other questions about the consent agenda or the preliminary agenda for next week? All right, if we could move, we'll do item 8, the Maryland Lottery and Western Maryland Blues Fest, since we do have guest here. Carl Disk is here with Karen to talk about that item.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
You want to start by giving
Well,
some
yeah,
tips?
we're really excited. At the end of May, we're going to be doing Blues Fest number 20. We've been here before to thank you. It's been kind of a lucky year, we think, leading up to it. This has happened a lot with Blues Fest, but we think it's really fortunate with our 20th anniversary celebration. First, it started in the fall when we began our programming, inviting some old friends that are alumni of our event, plus some new guests, and we were glad to see the eagerness with which they all responded. We actually have some guests coming from across the ocean to join us here in Hagerstown for our 20th celebration. Then we had the wonderful artwork that you all honored Corey Householder from the Barbara Ingram School, and we're really excited about the response of the community to his artwork as it's appeared on our poster. Keith Bomback of Icon Graphics did a great job translating that, and then the T-shirts. The community has responded very generously to our fundraising appeal. We're just zooming our way to a goal, and it's nice to see that after 20 years, how strongly the community supports that. Then we had a snow event during what was supposed to be a Thursday, Cabin Fever Blues Bash. We moved it to Friday. Our entertainer was able, their schedule was able to accommodate us. The Maryland Theater was, the sound man was, and we had one of our best ever Cabin Fever Blues Bashes in March. And then, of course, we've decided to use the beautiful as-built stage at the University of Maryland Plaza for our Thursday event this year. It'll be the first time we've done that. We're really excited. So it's been a lucky year. And then,
Paul Fowl.
Paul Fowl on The Voice, our Thursday entertainer, was on NBC's The Voice, did very well on that. So it's been a lucky year already. And then who shows up to give us more good luck but the Maryland Lottery?
And when they called, I did ask if I won, and they said.
We did win, though, in a big way, I
Yes.
think.
They called because they wanted to team up with the Western Maryland Blues Fest. They wanted to team up in two ways. The first way is they would like to do a live broadcast from the Friday event to do the Pick 3 and Pick 4 drawings. It will occur precisely at 7:57. We are, logistically, we are looking at some different areas. If you approve, believe me, you cannot go near those machines, or they can't do the drawing. So there are some stipulations, and we're working through that. And then the second is they want to do a table on Friday and Saturday. They want to give away scratch-offs, give away promotionals, sell some of their tickets. And also, they want to promote the Western Maryland Blues Fest. So when
We
they
like
talk
that.
about it, they'll show the festival from their website, do some promotion with that. And we think that it would be a very good asset to the festival. We think it would be a good addition.
Huge.
So we wanted to come to you to see if we can do that for this year.
I think it's great.
And they'll also give a sponsorship of $2,000.
So on Friday, they'll be telecasting and broadcasting, hey, it's going on all weekend, come to Hagerstown on Saturday and Sunday. We think that's huge, and we're really excited about it.
Usually you have to pay for that kind of
Yeah,
advertising.
Yes.
They're
That's right.
paying
That's
us.
right.
Yeah.
So true.
Any objection? Thank you very much.
Okay,
Carl, I
thank you.
appreciate all the work you've done over the
thank
years
you.
to keep this festival going and put us on the map.
Well, we couldn't do it without the support of the mayor and council's present and past, and our wonderful committee that works so hard all year long. So
Indeed.
thank you for that.
Excellent
Thank you.
volunteers. Thank you.
See you in May.
All right, thanks for that. The item number 3 is our next item, the tree boxes for the unit block of North Locust Street. I see there are new tree boxes popping up all over the place, and they look really good. Are
Yes.
these the same things we're talking about for the unit block?
Correct. We're working on the first block at the East Franklin Street right now. I think it's 28 trees that we're either installed or putting new tree boxes around. And we have a request, and Councilmember Munson can certainly elaborate on it, about possibly going around the corner on the first block of North Locust Street, which would be basically between Franklin and Washington Street. There's 6 existing trees there, pretty nice tree pits, as we call them. The request was to do something to protect those from different things. So we have this request. It would be about $5,000, but we thought we should get direction from everybody to see if it's something you want to continue beyond what we had already agreed to.
Any objections?
Well, I asked for how it fit into the rest of the city, and we certainly don't seem to have time for that. And I feel, again, that we shouldn't be adding to the budget when we're gonna be, at least I envision, talking about reductions to the budget. And all of these things are worthwhile projects. I'm not saying they're not. I just think that we need to measure them against everything that's already in there, rather than pass them during FY15. And if you save $5,000 in FY15, it goes to help fund FY16. So, you know, it's not free because it's paid for at FY15 dollars.
Well,
Don, I think, like I said, it's a good idea, but again, I frankly want to know what the prospects were all around town instead of just one block face.
Well, I agree and disagree with Marty. I agree that I think we need to understand what the plan is, you know, which streets you plan to do when and for what reasons. And I said, Don brought it up last week, I think we need to understand a little better as well, you know, when you plan to do grates, you know, is it part of sort of a bigger picture of doing a street at a time? You know, and that's why you aren't doing it or are doing it, you know, because let's face it, a resident doesn't want you on their street for several months putting grates in, and then back on their street next year putting boxes in, and then back on the street the next year, you know, replanting trees. So me, I think it has to be sort of oriented to the folks affected. in those areas, and what you're putting in when. It's just like the utilities, and nobody wants their sidewalk ripped up 7 times in 3 years, for 7 different reasons. The part that I disagree with Marty is, I make no guarantee that, what you spend in this year is 5,000 you're gonna add to the next year, and the converse of that is, if what you're saying within the memo is that there is available funding to expend on this particular item for this particular year, the result of not doing so places it, if I understand correctly, in reserves, right? I mean, it
Goes
could.
into reserve, which
And
means,
so, for me, I get a memo that says we're at, above that number now, so we basically take, the funds and we put them somewhere and let them sit, and increase that even higher, when you have this measure of request, and so, if it's available, I'd rather see it go than not go for a particular need. I just need to understand that it's done in some type of planned fashion.
So you're a yes?
No, I'm a yes to spending the funds, but I need to understand if we're just picking some street simply because we're picking some street in some arbitrary fashion. I'm not a yes to that. I felt like we were doing Franklin Street because you came in and said, here are the 7 things we're gonna do to Franklin Street as
That's
part
right.
of this particular plan.
And the general poor condition.
That's
of the
right,
tree.
so somebody needs to come into me and say, here is how it fits within the next street we're going to do, and the 7 things we're gonna do in that street. Otherwise, we're just jumping around at random requests, and that isn't how I would like to see it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Munson?
Let me make this point. In riding up Franklin Street the other day, I observed it very carefully, went very slow and observed it very carefully. There is no question you can start to see the improvements on Franklin Street a little bit. It looks better than it did 4 months ago. And I think that's a very positive sort of thing. Now, it turns out that the eatery down there on Locust Street, Perkins, attracts a lot of people from out of town. 30% of their clientele, according to polls they've taken, is from out of town. And when you sit at Burkett's and look out the window, what you often see are, quite frankly, dogs, sometimes cats, relieving themselves in the tree pits on that street. And for someone who's sitting in there eating, that's really not a very nice sight. So it seems to me that this investment of $5,000 would improve that area, which someday will probably be part of a trail to the fairgrounds, I would think. It would also enhance Burkett's business a little bit, hopefully, and for people who come in to eat there, because it is one of the closest places to Dual Highway to eat, they don't have to look at this terrible sight of seeing animals in the tree pits. I think there's work being done down there now, right, Rodney? You're putting those things in now.
On Franklin.
Yeah. And it just makes some sense to go around the corner and improve that area. An area that frankly is desperately in need of improving and hasn't really had much for a long, long time. So
In terms of, going to Kristen's point of when you come and you do the grades or you do paving or something else like that, I mean, that block of locust is pretty much done, right? I mean, it's,
They're existing tree pits, they're in pretty good shape, they have ground cover in them, which is the style of how we're treating the downtown urban street trees now, is bigger pits to allow more runoff and water to get into them, and then put a fence around them to protect all that, a tree box.
so I mean, in terms of a logical plan of doing multiple things to that block, it really doesn't seem like, I mean, when would that block come up next for any of those other things? I mean,
we probably wouldn't add tree grates later, but it does make sense for us to put together a plan of how far we'd want these tree boxes to go.
Right.
Is it just limited to right around the downtown area? We do have another style tree box that we used on South Prospect Street that was part of a kind of a community engagement project we did up there. They asked for those. They're
Yeah, so
not
one-
quite as heavy
Or even.
as the ones we
so
have
are the
down here.
ones up, a little farther up on North Potomac, are those?
Those were installed
private?
by social services on
Okay.
their own.
Okay,
Yeah.
so those are a little higher even
Yes,
than
they
these
are.
are. Yeah.
Well, these are almost 1,000 apiece. I can't imagine what the cost of those are.
Yeah, they're almost waist high.
Yeah.
And I think the problem has been identified by Kirsten and Martin, and that is, I think staff needs to make a proposal to us of what we need to do, for a number of reasons. One, if the method of getting $1,000 tree boxes is to simply come in and say, I want them, we're gonna be in trouble. And right now, that's what the proposal is. If somebody on Locust says, here's a lot of good reasons why you should put them in, and I have no doubt that he's right. And I also have no doubt that there's a whole lot of other places in our community that also have real good reasons to put them in. And I just think it has to be done in a different manner. I'm looking at tonight, and I also have to say, you know, for good or for bad, we have 3 items, 5,000 for this, 5,000 for this, 5,000 for this, is we are getting ready to embark in less than a month, basically, of a new budget. If I knew for a fact right now, that we could do the next year's budget with no tax increases, I'd probably say yes, yes, and yes. Right now, my answer is, on this, we need a plan. And candidly, we need to see what the budget holds, in my opinion, for the next two. But I think it has to be done in a different manner than this is being proposed. And I think, especially at this time, with the budget coming up, our citizens are acutely aware, as we are now, candidly. I don't think many of us were too aware that when we look at these tree boxes, they're about $1,000 a pop. And I hear social services, it would be a lot nicer to hear if the reason this is being done is for a business to help their business. And this is a business that I think the city has expended some money on to try to help and cooperate. It'd be nice to hear, especially when I look at Locust Street, there's trees relatively far away. It'd be nice to hear maybe of a private-public partnership here instead of just, I want, and that would make it easier to be able to look at, like the terrace. There's a reason we have really nice streetlights on the terrace. And that's because the people on the terrace said, we'll pay for them. So if private business wants expenditures of governmental money outside of a normal process to help their business, I think they need to come in as a partner and not just somebody who says you need to do it, and/or have staff give us a plan of where and when we should be doing this and how we fund it.
We could do that.
Mr. Munson?
Louis, you make a good point, and I can't guarantee that answer, but I've had a discussion along those lines. And I think there's a possibility that the private business would be able to make a contribution.
And that certainly would help. That would then get a new, that way we could look at other people who say the same thing and say, this is how it was done.
Yeah, and I think you do make a good point. We don't like to face these budget issues any more than we have to.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a rough time.
But I'll be happy to follow up on
Thanks,
that, and if we can get a
We all
commitment,
would like to help.
we can get a commitment, then we'll come back. Ask Robbie to come back.
When you're looking at that part, you're looking across the street.
That's right.
That's
That's
the
right.
trees across the
Yeah,
street.
yeah, you are.
So you have to realize then that Eagles is across the street.
Right.
And that's where the tree is that we're basically talking about.
Yes.
As you go further up, it's either renters or homeowners.
Mhm.
So when you're coming to that whole, okay, private sector coming in and trying to help, I can only see, honestly, if Mr. Burkett's willing to do something, it would be one Street
Yeah, I think
tree.
you're right about that.
And unless you can get the Eagles to say, oh gee, you know what, we'll go a little bit further, because I really wouldn't want to see the inconsistency. I mean, now, as you go further out, there are people that, because they go out and actually take care of around the trees, have put their own fences up, and that's what you're gonna end up seeing for those who really do care. But to have it consistent as to have the black rod Aaron around, I have to see where they're all at, because now I know that they're here.
Right.
And, you know, and then again, you said what they have up on South Prospect, but I really don't know where all of the tree boxes are.
The ones that are the style around City Hall are obviously around City Hall and
Around
then
City
in the
Hall,
square.
right.
And that's the only location.
And that's the only location,
The other style is on South Prospect Street.
yeah.
So what I heard Councilmember Metzner say was, it'd be good if staff could come up with a plan for.
We definitely can do that.
How we're gonna begin to expand those.
Incorporate it in our next budget process.
Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
That needs to be done.
And then if there's a private business or property owner in the meantime that wants to partner with the city, we can take that up
Absolutely.
as those requests come in.
Okay.
I guess I would, I understand this is we're gonna be looking at some tough budget decisions here. But I personally think that, moving on to the next two items, the BMX, being the next item, that these are worthwhile investments.
They are.
The BMX track, that attracts a lot of folks. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Attracts folks, engages kids in the community, really enhances our physical plant, if you will. Is a worthwhile investment, but I'll let you take it from there.
Well,
I'll stop editorializing and.
basically, as
turn
I
it
said in
over.
the memo, the direction that we collectively gave them in February when Brian was here and they made their full presentation was to go to the CVB and see what you could work out with them, and happy to report that they awarded or approved $5,000 towards the BMX track improvements based on the data and everything that we gave them. So at that time, there was kind of like a slightly open door. They could come back and see if there was any additional support by the city. So that's why we're here tonight.
Where would you get it from the budget?
That's also would come out of our kind of our general fund contingencies in this year's budget.
Do we have any idea what that balance is?
We're just saying we would have savings in the current year to cover it. I don't know if you've got a specific balance, Michelle, but when we did our mid-year projection, we projected that there would be some savings.
Correct, and I can double check current projections and send an email.
That's fine. I was just looking for a very rough figure. I think this is a little different because there is a partner here for what it's worth.
And the amount being requested, is that 5,000 or what is is that the
5,000.
amount? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
And I'm assuming that would be to match the CVB 5,000 for the asphalt
Correct.
portion of your needs.
Any other questions about the BMX?
Yeah, if I can. The needs assessment had asphalt of 10 and the soil tack of 5. So it's 15 that you need, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I
In
know
all
you're
actuality.
getting the other 5.
Well, we're doing several other fundraisers this year that we're hoping to achieve that 5,000 goal. The first thing we really need to address is the asphalt, which lends itself to the erosion problem that we have and also the drainage problem.
So would you be able to put the asphalt down without the soil tack?
Yes, so the
Okay.
soil tack is to stabilize the actual dirt that's on the track. The asphalt is just for the corners.
Just for the corners.
paved banked corners. And that's a large area as far as square footage wise for rain erosion and for collecting drainage. It aids in directing all that to the bottom, kind of like a basin. So we wouldn't need to do everything all at once, but as far as our needs go, they're kind of in order.
What do you think, you do the asphalt on the corners before the soil tack?
Have you gone out to any of the asphalt people?
Yes. Yeah, we actually have, we have a local donor who is going to donate these the asphalt in hopes that we get enough money to pay them back. That's one of our,
Well, I
that's one
mean,
of our.
because we have, you know, we have more than one in the county. So, you know, and most of the kids, I mean, how many kids do we actually have that are from Washington County, even Hagerstown area, that are now over at the BMX track?
Well, we haven't started our season yet. I mean, generally, we'll probably have 50 families. Most of
I know a
them
lot
is
of
general.
times it wasn't even within Hagerstown area when it first got started. And
Yeah.
I don't know what we have pulling now. I know we have somebody, I think, over on Locust, because I see the things on the vehicles.
Yeah.
But with all of the asphalt companies, I don't know why.
Ryan, given what you just said, it sounds like you're gonna be able to do the asphalt project one way or the other this summer, right?
Yes.
No,
We have a enthusiastic dad, basically.
Okay,
what-
so what if we said this, which we've done in the past with some others? If we said that between now and January 1st, we would fund you guys, we would do a matching up to $5,000. So if you guys were able to raise $5,000, we would match it. And that again would be another of the type of private-public fundraising. And I propose that because the impression I have is just what you, not the impression, you just told us, that what you're looking is to try to reimburse somebody who's willing to upfront this. So, and that may also be able to give you a better power of fundraising. When you got in fundraising, say the city of Hagerstown is gonna match every dollar that we raise up to $5,000, it may very well make your fundraising a little easier. And I would certainly be willing to do that. I'm not saying I wouldn't be willing to fund this generally one way or the other, but I absolutely would be willing to fund it on a matching basis. I don't know about anybody else.
I just
Any
want
other
to
thoughts?
clarify then too, the reason why we're kind of at the urgency is on this asphalt and the improvements we have to the track. We have a big race coming up at the end of May. And that plays a heavy role in the acceptance of the track for the rest of the season, and it brings a lot of people from out of town. And they're really the way we generate substantial funds, or the bigger races, and you can't do that with just.
And the other way to do it is to try to get us, give you the $5,000 up front to put the soil tank down and raise the other money to pay back for the asphalt, so you get both of those benefits up front. I would
Correct.
also be, I'd be more inclined to do it that way too.
Do we have sort of a user agreement with? Okay. Just curious. Fairgrounds Park, as an example, the soccer goals, the netting. Who puts those up?
They do.
They provide all the nets, they provide all the goals and everything. And then maintenance of the fields.
They provide that as well. We don't charge them any rent.
The YMCA. And the softball fields the same way.
Right. And the Hagerstown Area Youth Soccer League, Hazel, same way.
And in fact, the BMX track has been the same way also,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Yes.
They're the ones that are, so
Yeah,
that's
it's
why
the
I
first
say-
time they've ever requested.
Right,
it.
matching would be, to me, the best way to go, if you could do that.
Any other thoughts? Don, Marty, what are your,
I don't want
Thoughts
to,
on it?
at the moment, I don't want to commit any new items without weighing them against other items.
Don, how about you?
I like the idea of partnership that Lou's suggesting. And that's the way I would hope to approach this.
Penny?
Personally, I feel reaching out to a lot of these contractors. You know, softball, for instance, as well as Pony League, all of these, that's why they're wearing the things around the fence, is because they fund, you know? And I have 3 of the pavers, and I don't know how many more there are. It's just, you know, it's worth a shot
In terms of getting them to donate
to
it?
donate.
Maybe in
to
exchange for
donate.
putting a sign up or something like that?
Well, you
or-
know, I mean, this is what they do. They,
Mhm.
you know, they publicize.
Well, initially, when we established the track, some of the agreement was that we weren't allowed to do an excessive amount of signage. I mean, they didn't have a direct stipulation, but they didn't want it to look like a NASCAR track, in other
Sure.
words, with just billboards everywhere.
Geez, that seems funny. We have it all down around the
Well, that's what I think too,
softball field.
but we've tried
I
to
don't
comply
think
with
that's
that.
fair, you know?
Well, I was wondering, as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I wondered if there was
Yeah,
some
I mean,
stipulation
you know,
about
to
that.
me, that's, would be a no-brainer.
Well, I don't think you're located in a particular spot of the park that lends itself to the very public.
Right, and high visibility.
So you might be able to
Oh,
sell
you'd be
it.
surprised. There's a lot of them think that they can go out that way, so yeah, you do.
But I think your point is best made, and that's why I like Lou's proposal. The alternative is you don't do it, you don't have the larger events, and you have the decline, and it just doesn't exist.
Succeed.
And that's,
We'd like to ramp up instead of spiral down.
So the consensus I'm gathering is that the $5,000 from the city would be a matching grant after a period of time, or to be used in a fundraising effort to try to attract matching funds. Is that what I'm hearing? Or we would.
Well, I would, you know, I'm happy for staff to work with this. If I were doing it, what I would say is if we would match up to $5,000 and we would give the matches promptly. And to me, that would include if you guys got pledges that you knew were going to be paid. So if somebody pledged $100 today, we would match that today. So if you go out and get $5,000 in pledges, in the next 2 months, you'd have $5,000 from us. If you could get your contractor to indicate by way of charges that they're actually pledging money because they're doing it for cost or below. You know, there's various ways you could do it, but that would be my answer. It would be just like we're trying to do with so many other things of having the people who are asking for money have some skin in the game. And again, I think it would help them raise money. And more importantly, the vibes I certainly get is if it isn't done that way, we're gonna have trouble giving the 5,000. So that's my proposal.
Any other thoughts on the subject? Staff, do you have sufficient clarity on the subject?
As soon as they prove to us that they have pledges or money in kind, then we can dole out up to $5,000 of a match.
And you have the sources of funds
So does that
identified
mean if they
in your
have
budget?
2,500, we'll match 2,500?
Right.
That's how I understand it, yeah.
And is there a timeline, or?
I would say, I don't have a timeline. I think they have a
just
timeline.
trying to
They
be-
don't wanna find
Our-
two
Trying to
years
be
from
clear.
now.
Our two fundraisers, we have one in May here that we do in connection with the Bonanza Extravaganza. And also I do the car show in August. So the end of our season is usually wound down in September, October. So that kind of gives you kind of our time frame as far as how we're spaced out,
But,
again.
but as I understand it, Brian, that time frame of fundraising would not prevent you from getting this asphalt done promptly. That's my point. My understanding is you have the ability with the 5,000 you have right now, you have the ability to get this asphalt put down. And what you're looking for is to be able to raise funds to pay the contractor who's gonna put this down up front, hoping to get repaid.
Correct.
So if I thought that this would prevent you from being able to get the asphalt down, we could have a different conversation, but the asphalt's gonna go down, and you have the whole year to raise the money. And if you don't raise it within the year, you come back and say, we raised 3,000, we hope to raise another 2 grand. And hopefully your paver will work with us all, knowing that he's ultimately gonna get paid.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
The next item everybody will enthusiastically support is the request from the library. This actually we discussed before. Mr. Hanlon is here, representing the library. I think the question came up at the last discussion of this is, were any other municipalities supporting the public art project? I believe that was one of the questions that came up the last time we discussed it. Can you tell us more about the fundraising effort that's been undertaken so far for this project?
Sure. Let me give you the background if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
The Board of Trustees of the library started this when you all made a plea that you wanted to have some public art. And we were also looking to seize a way in which to celebrate the community's reception of the Fletcher, which has been incredible. So the board commissioned a piece of sculpture, public art, and authorized the establishment of a capital campaign to raise the funds for that. We have nearly 24 citizens, businesses, and organizations that have responded to it. We've invited the city to participate at the $5,000 level as a major donor, which would mean you'd be listed on the list of permanent donor recognition sign, which would be on the plaza at the back of the library. And I think it'd be a good symbol of the city's support. Now, this particular commission was awarded to Toby Mendez. Antonio Tobias Mendez. He grew up in Washington County, still maintains his studio here. As you may know, his dad, Tony Mendez. Toby got his love from his dad for art. He learned more about art by flipping through the art magazines in the stacks of the old library on South Potomac Street. And he has a number of pieces throughout the United States, including the Thurgood Marshall Memorial, Equal Justice Under Law at Lawyers' Mall at the State House, the C&O Canal Mule and Handler at Canal Place in Cumberland, and the various Orioles greats at the Legends of Oriole Park in Baltimore. People do travel to see his art. Toby was inspired by the transportation themes in the Fletcher, and he commissioned his work, Our Journey Transports Us Through Time. He created a bas-relief that incorporates his interpretation of the C&O Canal boat with a mule team, a Fairchild C-119 flying boxcar, a circa 1970 Mack RL 700, and a nickel plate locomotive bearing the number 759, which did travel through Hagerstown. Now, we are unveiling this sculpture on Thursday, April 30th at 4 o'clock. We did so through the office of Karen Giffen so that we could proceed in advance of the the Taste of the Arts, so we would hopefully draw people downtown and encourage them to stay. And we hope that you've all received invitations. You should have received invitations to attend that event. It is free, no RSVP required. And we hope that you will support by joining the over 12 major donors who have contributed to this project.
And the sources of funds for this would be general fund savings in the current year. That's what staff has identified. So, any discussion on this matter? I know.
Can you give me an idea of location?
It's on the plaza in the rear of the Fletcher.
Like when you get down the steps?
Correct.
On the left side?
Yes. In the, behind the security wall, so it's closed off at night.
Did you say there were a dozen partners?
We have 24 donors, over 1,000 have contributed at least, over a dozen have contributed over $5,000.
How close are you to?
We have collected, this is a $141,000 project.
So this.
And we are in excess of $125,000.
So this donation would complete the project?
It would come very close. Make a big dent that last little bit we have to collect, yes.
I think that's pretty impressive.
The people we've approached have responded very favorably to it.
Were any of those people who donated significant amounts Hagerstown corporate residents?
Yes.
So they're truly partners?
Yes. A lot of residents of the city.
I say ditto, part of the budget process. But if we do decide to do it, I recommend that we pledge them the money, but take it out of the public art project if that survives the budget process for next year. We have a CIP that has general fund funding in it. And so we can pledge it and pay it out July 1st out of that. If, that's not what I recommend right now, but if we do decide to fund it, if the group does, that's an option. Right now, I'd rather, put it as in with all those other budget things, because we're looking, at least I am, and I think other councilmen are bringing their budget down, and we're doing little dribs and drabs, bringing it back up, and I'm just not inclined to do that until we look at the big picture, know where we are. And I realize it's not convenient for BMX or the library, and it's always small amounts of money, but there's lots of other small amounts of money in that budget too. How do we know, that this has a priority over what's already in there? So we could fund it out of next year's budget if we decide to go along with that public art project.
You know, Marty, that's probably a very good idea. This is kind of like one of those bird in hand things.
Well, it's not in hand till
And
we-
it's going to come very fast. And so I think that's probably an excellent idea, and it keeps it cost neutral in that respect, too.
I would agree with Marty. I think the question is, and I'm a great supporter of public arts, and if it's going to be in the budget next year, then we can fund it with this. And that's the decision we have to make.
Just 2 points. The first is, the location for me isn't what I envision. I guess, I'll take the George Washington statue, right on a square of a corner. That to me, I guess, is more what I envision the public art thought process to be. However, the second part of that for me is, we've been in discussion for months with our county counterparts that, shared some interest in making vast improvements to what I would call the library proper. And that included the demolition of 2 buildings that are a drastic eyesore. And as one council member has pushed very heavily to get that moving and remove that eyesore from the library's sort of overall location, that's something that's in the tens of thousands of dollars, something that no other contributor to the improvement of the library's aesthetic appeal is willing to do, including the county commissioners. And for me, that's where I'd rather invest my money.
I guess a good question is, Dave, is the county budget any money for this project?
No, we've approached no public entities other than the city of Hagerstown, given your professed desire to have public art.
Well, I'll say this about that. One, we do have that desire to have public art, but I have to say, in all due respect, I agree with Kristen, that if I were going to think of a $141,000 public art project, it wouldn't be in the rear of the library. It would be somewhere where people walk and see it. And I got to say, the demolition of these properties are a heck of a lot more valuable to it concerns me that, again, that we are the only public entity being requested to contribute to this when we are probably the least affordable. And I really don't see this as the type of public art that we are talking about. It is not something that is really visible to the public. It's an art project in the interior of the library that if you're not visiting the library, you're not going to see. If it were on the North Potomac corner out front, you wouldn't even have to visit the library and see it. But the only way this public art becomes visible to our citizens is if they're at the library coming or going. And that's disconcerting, I have to say. It seems to me it's much more of a library project than it is a public art project. And to that degree, I think the county should be the ones who should be funding part of this, but that's a whole different story.
Mr. Brubaker.
And just to follow up on Lou's thread, and a thread that I've launched 2 or 3 times to library representatives and have never heard back from, ties right into what you're saying. Number one, I'm sure the library would supply a little data that shows people coming in the back. There's a lot more, I don't know what the ratio is, but I'm sure it's much higher. I use both, but a lot of people.
About 1,000 a day.
But tying, pardon?
About 1,000 a day use the back end.
I think
But-
more in the back.
But tying into that, and I've asked every time somebody's been in here for the last couple of years, and I've never heard back. So I guess it doesn't matter. I guess there's that. Is signs where the checkout counter is on the busy, active second floor, directing people to downtown Hagerstown. They can be done tastefully somehow. A stand-up pylon, or the ceiling's low because we had to follow the building blueprint. I knew that. Something that directs people, attracts people to downtown, to the Arts and Entertainment District. people that come in the back door, a lot of them, we all take it for granted. Do they know it's out there? Do they think about it? I've asked and never gotten a response, and yet we're back here with this.
There is a sign to the left of the circulation desk. It may not meet your standards, but there is a sign that talks about downtown events and
Well,
downtown activities.
yeah.
That is updated, not daily, but
I mean,
regularly.
something that catches your eye and directs you.
We
out
did
the-
invite,
Directs you out the door.
we talked about internally about some sort of another screen, like we have the one that does about the environment, that controls the building, that reports on the building's efficiency. We talked about doing something like that for downtown events. The problem we have is we don't have the resources to maintain a calendar.
Well, I
Electronic
didn't say it
version.
had to be events. I wasn't being that, I just said something that directs people, that out those doors is downtown Hagerstown Arts and Entertainment District or something of that ilk. It doesn't have to be an electronic signboard. That would be nice, I agree. But simple, eye-catching gets people's attention at that level. And that's what I'm talking about, not something super fancy.
So we'll discuss this for next budget on the public arts?
But I'm gathering that there is insufficient support around the table at this point to take the 5,000 out of the general fund savings in the current year is what would be recommended. And I guess that would be the best and only hope for this project. But I just want to say personally, I think it's an excellent addition to public art, even given the location that it's partially secluded, but it will certainly make that part of the library much more beautiful and attractive, and perhaps allow it to be more of an event center down there. And it's also about Hagerstown's history, and Hagerstown is the hub city.
Mayor, one of the most difficult things we have as a legislative body is trying to explain why we're not giving money to good projects. I mean, it's the problem, whenever you say no, there is this underlying theory that what you're saying is we don't like the project or it shouldn't be.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
And I think we
that.
all agree that it's a great project and there is not one negative thing about it. The question becomes of money. It gets that simple, and clearly the worst time to be asking for any type of money is generally
Always.
2 weeks before or 2 weeks after the budget is
January
passed.
through December.
And so we'll be facing it, and I think there's a good chance that it will be funded when I think we're either gonna fund public arts in the next budget or we're not. And if we do, I think.
And it's in the CIP.
What's your deadline date? When we-
Well, we're going to be unveiling on the 30th, but we will not yet have our donor recognition signs in place. Those will have to be cast, and we will obviously need to know before that's cast. I think it would be.
Our budget has to be approved by then, so.
And that is by, what's your date of approval?
Last of May.
Well, last of May,
Has
it's
to be, yeah.
usually the last week or two of May.
We'll know in a couple of weeks.
David, let me ask you what probably is a pretty dumb question, but I want to hear your answer. Is the piece of art in place yet?
No, it's being installed tomorrow. We just got the permit today.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be,
Was
it's
there
going to
ever,
be veiled. and-
was there ever any consideration given to putting it on the Antietam Street side of the building? There's a lot of room there, I think. So
Yes.
that lots and lots of people who might not go to the back would see it. Was there ever any consideration of that?
There was. There was concerns about, there was issues having to do with security. We would not be able to lock off the front from vandalism, but we are able to do it in the back.
Get locked off at drop-off blocks and back.
It will be blocked off tomorrow, Mr. Councilman, for
No, you
for a
lock
few
it
hours.
off. It's always locked off after hours.
I'm at the one in the driveway next to the southern part.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
We did look at it, we looked at a statute, but to be honest, when you do a commission like this with an artist, he's very particular in what he wants to do, to the point where he has the contract says he has naming rights. He can pretty much do what he wants, here's the fee. And we were very concerned having to do with security and those issues, so we had a dialogue with him, and we ended up saying that it probably didn't meet his expectations either.
well, you'd expect Toby to be concerned about security. in that his father was the most decorated spy in the history of the United States of America. So it's a sort of a DNA thing, I guess. But I envision this, and I'm sure most people sitting around this table see this in much the same way. At some point, we're going to have a public arts path in downtown Hagerstown where people will walk from this piece of public art to that piece of public art. And I don't see the location as being a real detriment in that regard, because that'll be on the public arts map, and people will just follow this thing out to City Park sometime, because this will occur on the A&E Trail as well in the future. But
Senator, I concur. Mr. Mendez has a following of people who will travel to see this when it's unveiled.
Toby has an incredible following. I used to see him in Annapolis all the time, it's really good for this town of Hagerstown, Maryland, to have a piece of his art here.
And I think that our money would be best spent accentuating that travel experience to the library by investing our citizens' money in tearing down those two dilapidated buildings and reclaiming that property for a public park purpose, of which the measure the county has decided not to do.
I think, frankly, that Marty makes a good point about the people at the library using the city. A bigger, more prominent sign would be good over there. I mean, somehow, we have got to get some of those people from the library coming over to the restaurants and using the shops downtown. We're finally getting some shops, and we need those people coming over and supporting them. So maybe you could talk internally about making that happen.
May I take a few seconds, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I made a list of things that are going on at the library this weekend that are going to be drawing people from outside of downtown.
Okay.
It is an amazing list. First of all, tomorrow night, Main Street is kicking off at the library. Thursday night, we're having a community conversation at 5:30 with a bunch of people dealing with economic development and young entrepreneurs about the possibility of creating a makerspace in downtown Hagerstown. I challenge you I invite you to look up the word makerspace in Google and find out what an exciting thing is for young people. Also at 6:30, at Bulls and Bears, Thursday evening, is the kickoff of a young adults group that we've begun to organize called the Next Chapter. This will be a young adults group that will use the library, support the library, help with fundraising. They are looking to use the library as a library-centric feature. Saturday, we're bringing people in for the quarter auction fundraiser. There's a concert on Sunday by Carinza Gray Trio. Monday night is a lecture by Bob O'Connor about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. We're expecting a good 100 people for that. On Friday, 160 Bester Elementary School children are coming up to make a special trip to meet with children's author Mark Tyler Nobleman, who's written a book, Boys of Steel, Creators of Superman. All those children will be receiving an autographed copy of these books. Tuesday night is the Emma K. Daub Free Literacy Night. I believe the mayor might be reading that night. There are hundreds of people who come for that. And yesterday we hosted the Maryland State Arts Council 2005 annual meeting. I think the library is engaged in bringing people downtown a lot.
And again, like Lou said, none
and
of us
I-
dispute that.
and I
I'm the
would-
biggest lover of the library.
And I
We
would,
just got away.
and I would only note that the only municipality in the state of Maryland put $1.5 million out there because we agree with you, Dave. We totally agree with you,
Got
and
$1.5
that's,
million people in MML say you did what?
right,
So-
and that's why we did it.
We showed a pretty big commitment, I
Yeah,
think.
so we're all in agreement.
Good.
That's why I say, the only problem you have is when the money situation hits, and then we're all in agreement. And hopefully, we can get this done in a manner that's appropriate. But I have to say, Kristen brings up a huge point. We have an expense to tear down these buildings that are going to benefit the library, I would like to think, in a great way, between getting rid of the eyesores and having green space there. And that's part of our budget that we have to look at, because we're gonna get no assistance from other government entities to do that. But we thank you for everything the library's doing.
Hopefully, we'll fight, I'll fight hard to keep that public art money in the budget. because
Well, we want it.
I don't get a vote.
No question about that.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
I'll
you.
make-
Speaking of that, we'd love
Before you
to find
leave.
some sidewalk art.
Before you leave, I'll make this point too. Lou just made a very good point about the city of Hagerstown putting its heart and soul into the library. And of course, the state senator, John Donahue, and I got, what was it, $11 million for that library. So I have a bias toward that library. I spent a lot of time there when I was a kid. And I'm with the mayor.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Next item on our agenda is the Catalyst Project Number 8, state-funded acquisition of real property, 278 South Prospect Street. Mr. Kearns joins us.
Good evening. As the mayor noted during preliminary agenda review, next week we're scheduled for introduction of an ordinance for acquisition of 278 South Prospect Street. And this would be a project under Catalytic Project 8 of the Community City Center Plan, an acquisition and resale project for home ownership. Traditionally, we've done these types of projects with our federally funded CDBG program. As the federal funds continue to dwindle, looking at different funding sources for these types of projects, we were awarded a community legacy grant from the state of Maryland for a home ownership project. And the unique aspect of this particular project is the state actually owns 278 South Prospect Street currently. But we have worked out with the state through discussions with their attorneys and their staff that our community legacy funding would be eligible to actually buy their property and use some of that funding that's left over from the acquisition for some minor renovations. And the other thing to note with this project is it would be a project that has no income restrictions. So the property could be resold to anybody without income restrictions, which I think makes the project more feasible. With the current purchase price proposed by the state is $72,000. We would have $28,000 left to do some light renovations, which of course would not be enough to renovate the entire property. But since there are no income restrictions, we think that would make it feasible for a new homeowner to renovate and make it their home. And
Is this the one that was going to be going to auction?
correct.
Okay.
I believe it was set for auction near the end of March. And after we had some initial discussions with the state, they agreed verbally, and they did cease the auction, and it is off the market currently.
And what process will we go through to sell it? Will we do with all the others, the competitive negotiated sale?
We can look at that.
Or hire a realtor?
Traditionally, our home ownership projects through the federally funded program, we have not done a competitive negotiated sale. Typically, it's a first come, first serve. This one, we can look at a competitive negotiated sale process.
I was just curious as to what that process
So we
would
can
be.
put a clause in requiring homeownership.
Correct. And one thing I would note is we're receiving
key
interest. We're receiving interest already on the property. Some folks have contacted the state, and the state has referred them to us. And we've, of course, said we're still working through the acquisition, but we're keeping a list. So once we have the property in hand, we'll begin receiving applications for it.
Is this not the property too that the Neighborhoods First Group wanted to be involved in? And once we
If
reach that point of it's not going to go to auction?
they were interested in potentially looking at a partnership for acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
but since we have a funding source, I think they were interested in protecting the neighborhood by buying it if necessary. But that was a very preliminary discussion, and there was no official agreement or anything like that.
I know, but I know that the interest was there and was there long before all of this had even taken place.
It still may be
Because
in play
there's
for other
still-
properties, I would imagine, on that
Yeah,
street.
And there is still interest, as far as I know, yeah,
Yes.
Jonathan,
to keep it homeownership.
you did a great job on this project. I mean, this thing is assessed at $243,300, right?
That's correct.
And you got it from a kind of a stingy state for $72,000, and a grant to pay for it. You can't do much better than that. This thing should go, once it's in a little better condition, it should go fast. I mean, it's a beautiful view looking at the park when you go in and when you go out. And I just commend you for this. This No easy piece of work, I'm sure.
Very good work.
And just to make double sure, we don't have to reimburse Community Legacy?
That's correct.
So,
We do not have to reimburse them. And we would discuss with Community Legacy, but my understanding is, we would discuss this with them for sure. My understanding is we would have proceeds from the potential resale. We could utilize it again for maybe a similar project.
For a home ownership program, right, for the same purpose.
yeah.
Any objections then?
Just to clarify, in addition to the acquisition, are you okay with the use of the 100,000 with the balance for renovation? Is that what you
Makes
requested?
That's
perfect
correct,
sense.
and once we have more specific details on the renovation, we would come back
We'd
again,
come
but
back.
yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is the Shenandoah Mobile.
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. Chantel.
Yeah,
As things have gone tonight, to bring something forward where we can actually increase the
Sounds like
revenue.
Isn't that a 60s singing group?
I believe it is. Lynn Kerner is here with me tonight. If you did have any specific questions of Chantel, but as you can see, it is on what we call the old City Farm property, which is utilized by the wastewater facility. It's an MDE-approved site. We have it located off to the side where it would be out of the way. On the mapping that I did, I actually overlaid the existing plant on the vacant property. At some point in time, our plan always was to move the new wastewater facility to that location. If it's 30 years out, 20 years out, that's kind of what we were holding that spot for. We're off to the side. It's a 100 by 100 acre plot requested. They will have to do some improvements, minor improvements to extend Kenley Drive, which is at the end of Unilever's property. Work with Rodney. They'll need a grading permit and do some gravel and roadway work there in order to get back to the property. But they have two other sites with us within the city. We've had a long-term relationship with them in the Hagerstown Light Department with our pole attachment agreements. Good company to work with, and if everyone's in agreement, we'll go ahead and do the baseline work and get it back to you then for a further review.
Good deal.
Mike, how do you go about determining whether we're getting a fair lease on some of these? Do you compare it with others or something? I mean, some of these things are sort of out there, and you have no idea what the market is.
You know, we have, and just in the utilities itself, we have an agreement with US Cellular, and it is almost exactly written as that. We speak with the county who has other agreements, so it's kind of the industry norm. I don't know if there are those out there that request, you know, a much greater fee. It seems reasonable to what we receive in this area. Scott's would know better. He's a little more in tune with it than I am. We have some discussion with IT and engineering on it. But we can look further into it. It's open to discussion at this point.
Yeah, it's sometime if you happen to know what they're doing, not just here, but let's take Frederick or Cumberland or Chambersburg or Martin, for similar kinds of things.
I'll get some comparables when
within
they come
our
back in.
general market area. I mean, I don't know if there's any comparables.
Yes, sir. There are.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have done item number 8, so why don't we take a short break, 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene to talk about the budget. For rejoining us, we're going to talk about the budget. I'm going to turn it over to staff. We're talking about the general fund tonight.
Yes, and what we thought we would do, since it's been several weeks since we did the document and had it out available on our website, we touched last week on utility groups, but we thought we'd take a quick step back. For those who do not know her yet, Christine is here. She's our budget officer. I'm going to just let her go through like a quick overview of some of the key assumptions and the factors. We'll go ahead and look at general fund projections and keep it pretty much at a higher level this evening so that we can kind of look at a 2-year period, fiscal year 16 and 17, with the goal that next week when we return, we would look a little bit more in detail at the general fund and possibly look at general fund reserves and hit some of these other funds, since we'll have a little bit more time. Is that okay?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, Chris.
So, in looking at some of the assumptions that we made in making the budget.
First, will you
He's
move
gonna
your
tell you that.
microphone?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm soft
A lot closer, please.
Is that better?
As long as you talk into it, that works. Thank you.
In looking at the assumptions that were made for this year's budget, obviously, as a service industry, we have a lot of wages and salaries, so we thought we'd go over some of the assumptions that we made for those. Currently in the 16 budget, we have wages for our unions, which are based on their contracts. Police SB 3373 is scheduled to receive one longevity step on July 1st.
And we'll just stop for just a second. We actually have a nice chart in section 1 on page 7 that just goes into this history, but we want to summarize the impact of what's there for fiscal year 16, and remind everybody of the actual contracts that are in place already.
Right, and may I also note that if you take a good look at the schedule, you can see that from fiscal year 10 to fiscal year 13, there were no COLA or steps that were given out to staff, primarily because of the decrease in the revenue streams. In terms of the wages, again, going back to what's based on the existing contracts, police will be receiving a one longevity step on July 1st. Fire will receive a 2% COLA and one longevity step on July 1st. And Ask Me 1540, a 1% COLA on July 1st and one longevity step on the Monday after their anniversary date. IBEW is currently in negotiations, so that began in March, and those are still ongoing. Non-union will be scheduled to receive a 1% COLA and one step on July 1st. And I think it's important to note that currently 3 of the 4 unions have wage reopeners in fiscal year 17. If you turn your page to page, oh no, I'm sorry.
We're gonna flip back, I think, to the financial projection section, which is in section 7. The best place really to see the next overall change in benefit assumptions is on a chart. Again, and that's section 7, page 10.
So if you look at the schedule at the bottom of the page, you will see retirement, and you can see that for fire and police, the pension cost is 13.71% of salary, and this is a 1.6 increase over last year. For retirement for State of Maryland Fund, that has decreased 12.3% and is at 8.53% of salaries. Currently, the medical insurance for the entire city is presumed to be 5% based on information from CBiz, and the dental insurance is expected to remain flat, also based on information from CBiz.
So basically, with the pensions, again, the chart that we're looking at is specific dollar amounts just to the general fund, but these assumptions are global assumptions across the city. The State of Maryland gives us the information, and we were very surprised when we received it that there is a decrease in the employer share, the employer match on the pensions this year. It's going from 9.73% in fiscal year 15 down to 8.53% in fiscal year 16, which again is a pretty significant decrease. One that we're not anticipating will continue to occur in the future, knowing the current state and condition of the Maryland State Pension Fund. The other pension that is on here is police and fire pension. Again, we recently had CBiz in to do year-end update on that fund, and the impact of all of the police and fire pension is strictly within the general fund. We noted, I think at the time that they were here, that there was going to be an increase. So we're going from 13.5% of the salary in fiscal year 15 to paying 13.71% increase, or 13.71% of the salary towards the pension cost in fiscal year 16. And then the other big drivers, again, the health insurance 5% increase, and just as a note, not only 5% increase for our active employees, that same percentage will apply to all of our retirees as well. So some of the key drivers, one of the things I think that isn't mentioned on this chart this year is workers' compensation. And workers' compensation, if you recall, currently we have a guaranteed premium. We are transitioning on July 1 to a self-insured model, so that is going to produce savings. Our current model is actually a percentage of salaries, but when we move to the self-insured model, that will no longer be the case. And we'll look at workers' comp dollars and impact in just a few minutes. But I think what we'll do is we'll turn it back over to Chris, and we'll actually take a look at the staffing schedule.
So if you return back to section 1, page 75, there's a 5-year comparison of the staffing for the city. And currently in the general fund, there are, sorry, I have to cheat, I can't see these small numbers, 326 full-time employees, 37 part-time, and 13 unfunded positions. All other funds have 146 full-time, 12 part-time, and 11 unfunded positions. There has been an increase between fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 16 of 9 employees. What comprises that number is 5 positions in code administration. There's a new position in the Human Resources Department to assist with the transition to the workers' compensation, the self-funded workers' compensation program. 1 sworn police officer in the Washington County Library. There was a movement of a 30-hour part-time position to a full-time position in the Parks Department, and we funded one of the unfunded positions in the Public Works Department.
So currently in fiscal year 16 proposed budget, there are 9 additional positions above and beyond fiscal year 15. Of those 9, only 2 are currently not yet approved. If you recall, we made changes and upgrades and enhancements to our code administration and planning area, and that's where we got the total of 5. There's an administrative person plus additional inspectors. When we looked at the workers' compensation and approved the transition to self-funded, that additional position was approved, and we actually have a new person who started there. We recently approved the addition of the sworn officer at the library, and even though that position is added, it's important to note that there will also be an offset, some revenue back that the county reimburses.
Yeah, I think when you look at this chart, 3 things stand out as you look at it over sort of the last 3 to 4 year period. One is we've increased employees.
Correct.
But that's been heavily accomplished by grants, offsets, and fee-associated revenue enhancements as well as savings. I mean, those are the primary drivers in all of those increases. The part that got me that I had the question was under Public Works in particular, and we've heard for some time, you know, their concern with the ability to keep up with all of operations, especially as we continue to add maintenance operations. But I see a drop of an equivalent of 6 when you add full-time and part-time, and I just want to make sure that that's not an actual drop of 6, that maybe that's a change out from identification from one department to another.
In Public Works itself?
Yeah. Did we move them, or did we actually lose those? Because you have your 8 part-time, right? And your 2 full-time.
And I think
From 11-12 to 15-16. And the equivalent, if you cut the part-time in half and add the 2, that gives you a total of 6.
right. And so on our chart, we have full-time and part-time, but it should not include seasonal. And I think what you're going to find in the Public Works, where in fiscal year 13 we had 8,
But
that's really seasonal staff.
Okay.
So we didn't lose those. It's
Okay.
just that they're not here on this going forwards because, again, they're seasonal. When we look at their departmental level and their departmental information, we include all staffing. We'll see it there. The actual number of employees for them, so the 2 positions, and again, so of those 9, there's 2 that wasn't currently approved yet.
Right.
One is in Public Works. So we took, if you look at fiscal year 15, they had 32.9 total positions, 5 were unfunded. So they
Right.
really had 27.9 that was funded in here and approved.
right, you bumped it up a little over half of them.
Right, and so what happens, so we unfunded the one, but the position that they're getting isn't gonna necessarily just be concentrated in Public Works. That person is also gonna help oversee some of the operations under property management. And you're gonna see that shift between general fund and down below, if that makes sense for that additional point.
Okay.
So basically, this chart, for instance, if we have a person who is shared between departments, it's going to, that one position is going to show in both departments, but they're going to show as a 0.5, or however much portion of their time is spent in each applicable area.
And the 8's a reclassification, not an actual loss.
Right. To seasonal.
Right.
And then just the other position, again, is in Parks and Rec, that currently also is not approved. And it's taking a person who's a 30-hour-a-week employee and bumping them to 40 hours a week, adding benefits. But within Parks and Rec, we've identified with the assistance of Rodney and Amy Riley, additional revenue, additional recreational programs that have been added and are being added currently, and that's going to help offset that cost.
Is it fair to say that most of the increase in employment has been with the police?
Prior to fiscal year 16, that would be a correct statement.
So, and it was badly needed.
And just as a reminder there, Chris and Mr. Alshire has already touched upon it, but in police, we have been fortunate, and we can even check with Chief, but we received our first cops hiring grant 2 years ago, and that covered 5 positions. We got a second one that covered 2 positions. So that enabled us to do 7 additional positions. And those numbers are reflected here.
While we're on that page, if I could just add, for Public Works, I think Eric came in 2 years ago and requested this position, something that he's been requesting for some time. I have to say, in terms of the unfunded positions, Public Works has shouldered a higher percentage than any other operation. They've got 5 unfunded positions in the current year. When you compare that to the total number of positions, Public Works has shouldered the highest percentage in terms of the impact on their operations. And the thinking on this position is trying to strengthen Public Works in a manner where Eric has the same kind of management supervisory support as we have in place in our utilities, where we have an operations manager position to support Eric, as Mike has with the 3 support positions in utilities. That was some of the thinking in trying to get a position back in Public Works. Unfortunately for Eric in Public Works, they don't have grants and revenues to offset the cost of the position. He's in an unfortunate position there.
Did you say some of that was funded by the property management fund?
Correct.
How much? What percent?
I'd have to go back and look. I think it was a 0.2.
About a fifth.
It's about a fifth.
Okay.
I think Councilmember Nye is asking to.
I'm sorry.
No, I said cut it off.
The air conditioner. Trying to save money here.
We're getting an
We didn't,
That Lou Marty now, it's
didn't-
like, okay.
we didn't fund it last week, so we're just trying to blast this out because we didn't fund it.
Sorry, the mic picks it up and I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute.
No, that's
Arctic
the kind of
blast.
you're talking about. They just want to get us out of here early, tell me that.
Good plan. Good plan, Donna. Good plan. And then we'll turn it back over to Chris.
And if you want to turn the page, on the next page is a listing of the unfunded positions. You can see that the general fund has 13 unfunded, and all other funds have 11, for a total of 24 unfunded positions.
And again, you can see the detail by department on the prior schedule, which has the 5-year. But we have continued to been asked for further detail. So this gives us a snapshot. So as of fiscal year 16, all of our unfunded positions, they're listed by department, but they're also listed by the positions that were unfunded or at the point that the position became vacant. And just as a reminder, we use this term unfunded. Basically, several years ago, in an effort to offset and cut and reduce expenditures as a result of the significant decline in our revenue stream, one of the things we did here at the city was we implemented furloughs, we reduced staffing, but when we reduced staffing, we continued to identify the staff that was no longer here. And the positions that were reduced, some have been permanently terminated from our count, and the other 24 is what's reflected here, positions that we are hopeful that someday, if the funding were in place, that these would be the key positions the departments have identified that they need back. Okay, so I think what we'll do is turn back to section 7, and I apologize for the flipping. Our document has so much useful information, and it's very good information. Sometimes I'm not sure it's laid out as user-friendly when we're doing the review here as it is for other purposes.
A lot of it's the same information presented in different formats. too.
It very much is. A lot of it is people's preference and what they prefer to look at.
Right.
Some, knowing that we have some users who prefer to see charts and graphs versus numbers. Others prefer to see some narrative and written, analytical. So it's a variety, and the information is there repeatedly. We try to break it down because it is so huge by fund, so it's a little bit easier to look at a piece at a time.
So where in section 7 are we?
So in section 7, let's go ahead and just start. Let's just jump in on page 3. Page 3 is a synopsis of all the revenue in the general fund. So we basically did a brief overview of the impact across the city, citywide, but we're going to focus the rest this evening on just the general fund. So our revenues here, in the financial projection section, we see 2 years of actual information, 2 years of history. We see the current fiscal year 15. We see the 15 budget as well as where we estimate we're going to end the year right now. We see in the middle fiscal year 16 proposed budget, and then in the far right corner, in the right-hand side, we see estimated and projections for 4 years out into the future. Again, I think with our current condition and our current estimates, it's very, very important for us to stay focused, not just on fiscal year 16, but also on fiscal year 17, knowing that once we make it through fiscal year 16, we still have 1 more year, which is 17, until we get a new triennial reassessment period. And the reason that's so important is because in the general fund, the majority of our revenue, of course, comes from our taxpayer base. So the very first item that we look at the top is total property tax revenue. These lines for fiscal year 16 total $28.3 million. And when we say total property tax revenue, that encompasses our real estate, our real property, as well as corporate personal property, and current pilot agreements that we have. And we have a couple pilot agreements with external agencies as well as our utility funds. So we don't necessarily charge our utilities real estate, but we do assess them a pilot, and they do support and provide that revenue to the general fund. The big change in fiscal year 16 in the revenue for property tax, we'll look at a chart that shows the assessable base, because that's pretty much what drives our revenue. So I'm going to have us all flip the page, if you don't mind, and look at page 5. In fiscal year 15, our revenue, we're estimating, and I'm going to focus us at the middle of the page and just look at property taxes for a moment and exclude pilot. Our revenue is estimated to be $23.9 million. That is greater than we originally anticipated when we did our fiscal year 15 budget. The primary driving force we mentioned when we looked at the fiscal year 15 mid-year review is our assessable base. We received that information from the state. It is higher now than what they anticipated that it would be when they gave us our constant yield notice last February. When looking at fiscal year 16, I've included an increase there, and
That is twofold. First, I'm estimating that we'll have a slight growth in our assessable base. And when I say slight, it's 1%. Reason for 1%, it is the last year. Again, it's year 3. Typically, we have seen growth, slight growth, in years 2 and 3 after a reassessment period. Most recently, that occurred because we had tremendous growth along the Eastern Boulevard corridor. So we're hopeful that we'll get a 1% growth, and that would actually represent new businesses or additional buildings coming onto the tax rolls. The remaining difference in the revenue is that in the fiscal year 16 proposed tax before you, we have included a 5-cent tax rate increase. And that tax rate increase is on the real property tax. And then in the out years, fiscal year 17, we've assumed that we will have continued growth in our assessable base. And the change there is all assessable base. It's 2.5%. And then fiscal year 18 would be the first year that we would see the impact of our new triennial assessment. We're being very, very optimistic, and we've included a 5% rate growth there.
And Michelle, if we could just to put it in perspective, for FY15, the assessable base dropped 5.9%.
Correct.
For FY16, the assessable base, while you're assuming a 1%, the constant yield notice showed a slight fraction decrease. So the 2.5 that I asked finance to put in for 17, I said was optimistic. They described it as you're being wildly optimistic on 2.5% and 5%. I just want to say, since this is my last budget, just so you know, we're being pretty optimistic on those out-year projections. The current year and the prior year experience don't really show us that kind of increase in year 3 and then the new year. But we're thinking optimistically, and we'll see.
And we're throwing some different percentages out there. We're actually changing topics a little bit, but the assessable base growth, there is a chart on page 6 that just shows the assessable base value and the growth, and that's within the first 2 columns. And we actually have history there that goes back to fiscal year 83. And you'll see at the bottom of the page for fiscal year 15, it shows a 5.9% decline. Again, that number is reported to us. We receive that on our constant yield notice that the state sends in to us. At this time last year, February 2014 memo from them predicted a 7.8% decline. So we are better than they originally anticipated and provided in that statement. But again, still a significant decline consecutively after our assessment period 3 years prior.
And then the other thing I would just note, and maybe you're going to cover this, but the general fund budget in total is $42 million approximately.
Correct.
28 million of that is property tax revenue. So just thinking of the relationship, 28 million out of the total of 42 comes from property tax.
Correct. The 5-cent, the proposed 5-cent tax rate increase yields approximately $1.2 million. Again, the decision wasn't easy. We struggled when we balanced this budget, and in looking at all the different priorities and projects and things within mayor and council goals that have been established, along with some of the projects that are currently ongoing, in order to get us through, not with just one-time changes and reductions, just trying to also think ahead to fiscal year 17 impact. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Bruce kind of mentioned and stole my thunder, but that's okay. Back on page 3. I actually appreciate it. Thank you. In fiscal year 16 budget, overall, total property tax revenue, and again, this includes the pilots, $28.3 million. So $28.3 million out of approximately $42 million in revenue in the general fund is all taxpayer supported and tax dollars. In fiscal year 17, again, I mentioned including a hopeful estimate in a growth of 2.5% in our base. When we look at total property tax, that increase is going to be 2.2%. We are hoping that our base increases, but that doesn't necessarily impact the pilots or some of the other things within this revenue stream.
When you refer to bases, are you referring to both the base and additional growth? I guess when I couple that with page 6, what I'm trying to do is reconcile the decline in percentage as it applies to the cents, the actual cents that one would apply to their tax bill. In other words, 6 years ago, the tax rate was X, and it applied to assessment Y. Now, the tax rate is a different figure, and it applies to, and obviously, a different assessment. And I think, for me, that's the only way I'm trying to zero out things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. The best place then to see that difference is going to really be on page 6 in those figures that show just assessable base. Because here it's truly just those figures on real property, so the very first 2 columns.
That's just a figure applied to
Real
current as
property.
of that time property,
Correct.
not new growth that occurred during that year.
This would be the numbers. It
You know how the
wouldn't,
sheet, you get the sheet each year, it says your constant yield is some
From the-
figure, and it says,
from the state.
here was your assessable base last year,
Mhm.
here's what we project your assessable base to be this year, and here's the tax rate you apply. I'm trying to get the figure before you add in the additional growth. And I know you might not have that here, but that for me, I think is the only way I can zero it out in my mind to say the actual increase.
Okay.
Folks hear 11 cents and 5 cents, but I think that, that figure, or those 2 figures, as it applies to the tax cent on the tax dollar, is relative to what the assessable base was at that particular fiscal year before the state decides to add in your new assessed amount, your growth.
right, okay. And when we get that memo, of course, the state does in their estimates go ahead and include what they're projecting.
Right, they do both.
Yes, new addition.
Okay, if I can get a
amount for
copy of the
appeals.
last several years of those sheets, that'd be great.
Okay,
And I can figure it out for myself.
that's okay, we got those. We're gonna flip back over to page 3. And other than the property taxes in the general fund, the next largest revenue source, we have state and county shared tax revenues. And within this category, there's several things. There's our portion of the income tax. Again, that's collected by the state. The state does the calculation and sends back to all municipalities and their share in their calculation. We also have been fortunate enough to continue to receive state aid police protection, as well as a small amount for Senator Amos, which is our fire protection. Those 2 are added together in the line that you see there. In fiscal year 16, we're hopeful that the amounts are going to pretty much stay flat. And again, we aren't optimistic that we'll see much more growth in the out years. Room tax, that is what others currently refer to as hotel motel tax. Again, our current estimates are $177,000. Again, it is calculated, that amount goes to the county. The county does the calculation and sends us a check. And it is not anticipated, at least in our budget, that the way that that's calculated or our allocated share is going to change throughout the next couple years. So fairly limited there. We can't really see much room or opportunity for growth. One of the revenue streams that have been the most constant, that we haven't seen an actual decline, and hopeful that we will not, would be in the state income tax. When you add those 2 together, that's $32 million. And again, 32 million out of a $42 million budget. So we do receive other revenue streams. We have some grants. I would draw your attention to, right underneath grants, we have administrative allocation, that's $2 million. That $2 million, again, comes from our enterprise funds. It comes from water, electric, wastewater, and property management. We have our refuse service fees. That's our recycling and our trash and our sanitation. And then about 3/4 of the way down, we see our Safe Speed for School program. And we're estimating that in fiscal year 16, it's going to stay flat at 1.7 million. That's where we're seeing the current trends for the fiscal year 15. We have all cameras up and operational, not anticipating that we're going to see a change there in 16, but then in the out years, 17 and 18, we're expecting it to level off a little bit to 1.6 and eventually trickle down as far as 1.5 million. And again, that's the whole goal of this program. It's a public safety initiative. We're hoping to change people's driving patterns and behaviors. The last thing I just want to note is towards the very bottom of the page, we have appropriated fund balance. So in fiscal year 16 budget, one of the things that we have done is we looked at our Invest Hagerstown programs. And if you remember, I think Jonathan Kearns came and did a presentation. That program has been very well received, and it's first third grant, it's citywide down payment and rehab. We're anticipating that we're actually going to fund and spend an additional $613,000 there. And we had previously approved that source of funding would come from fund balance reserves. Page 4, we'll take a quick look at this expenditure. So this page is a snapshot. It's very much like the revenue, only it's on the expenditure side. The very, very top of the page, you're going to see in fiscal year 16. So all those things that Chris mentioned on that initial salary scale, all those items that we've incorporated in. And within the general fund, we're a little unique. We actually have 3 out of 4 of those union groups that are incorporated in our general fund expenditures. So between salaries and wages and benefits, it's $28.5 million. Our total expenditures are 42.5. So by far and large, our largest expenditure in the general fund is in our salaries and wages. That percentage actually hasn't changed. It's been right around 67 to 68%. It's been that way for years and years. For breakout and further detail, because it's such a large expenditure, I just want us to turn to page 9. Because on page 9, we actually do a little bit more detail where you can see the individual salary, you can see overtime, and then you can also see total fringe benefits. So in total wages, which we're projecting in the budget to be $19.2 million, $1 million of that is comprised of overtime. $18.2 million is in salaries and wages. And I just want to note, I added 2 lines here. So the $18.2 million is actually 5.7% increase over fiscal year 15 budget. And again, we have 9 additional positions in fiscal year 16 that were not in fiscal year 15. All of those positions are within the general fund. If we exclude the impact of those 9 additional positions, the actual salary increase and impact from our contracts that we currently have in place is 3.4%. So in looking at that 3.4%, utilize that as my basis for the out years and project it that in 17, 18, 19, and 20, salaries overall would increase 3%. And again, it was my basis so that I had somewhere to start. In the benefits section, one of the things I promised to point out, I'm going to stop us half of the way down for workers' compensation. Again, this is just a general fund. Workers' compensation is across all funds, but by far and large, the general fund pays the largest portion. In fiscal year 15, we're going to end up paying $1.1 million in workers' compensation. And looking at what CBIZ provided to us and recommended that we would see for fiscal year 16 when we move to the self-insured model, that is going to be reduced to $758,000. And the savings there, just as a reminder, the savings that we're seeing there is what's helping to fund and offset the additional position in HR.
Well, I think it's interesting you point that 3.4% out, because if you look on page 6, I think it is, you'll see that between 5 and 6, 5 shows you your tax, your total property tax income. I think it's like a little over 28 million and change. And if you project out the next 4 years, it goes up to 32. And you're projecting over the next 4 or 5 years that that's going to grow at about 2.2%, right? If you look at page 9, you're projecting that your employee pay, which is almost exactly the same amount as your total property tax you take in, you're projecting that to grow at 3.5%. There's no way you're going to be able to keep up with the budget, with the total property tax you take in, by taking in 2% more in property tax than you took in last year and paying your employees 3.5% more than you paid on the previous year. It's just not going to work. I mean,
Unsustainable.
There's no way. And those are your two biggest numbers. They make up about, what, 80%? And so
And they
That's
go.
been the structural imbalance
They're-
we've wrestled with for years.
if they don't match, then all these other numbers,
And
are just detail.
Right, and again, in fiscal year 16, we're very fortunate that contracts are in place and it's a known impact. All of the contracts, 3 out of the 4 union groups and all 3 of the groups are within the general fund, reopen in fiscal year 17. Not knowing what the negotiations are gonna entail, basis-wise, I didn't really have a way. I wrestled with that. If I put 0% in, then we're assuming that we're gonna give no salaries and increases in wages, and that's not necessarily a decision that I can make. So at this point, I just,
Bottom line, those two numbers don't match. You look at a property tax increase. Pretty much every time they don't match.
No.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
perfectly accurate.
all right, it is, yes.
I mean, there's other things you can do. I mean, you can reorganize, you can change the size of your government, you can do a lot of things. You can change how much people pay for benefits, but those bring down the line that Kristen's talking about, the expenditure line for staff. There's some ways of doing it. The other things are contracts. There's a number of ways, but as long as there's a fundamental mismatch in these two large-scale items, you're gonna have a sustainability issue. So,
Correct.
you know,
If we turn back to page 4 and look at our other expenditures, I just to note, contracted services, some of the key things there in our contracted services, we currently pay Breckford. Again, Breckford oversees and manages our Safe Speed for School program. One of the nice things in fiscal year 16 budget is that when Chief renegotiated the contract, instead of paying them a fee based on every single citation, it's a flat fee. It should produce a savings for us in fiscal year 16. So it's pretty much the driving force and why we're looking at reduction in contracted services. The other big thing really in this line, we do include our 400, sometimes 405,000 that we pay to the county as part of our agreement for the dispatch services. Other lines here, I do want to note, if we come down, debt service, you're going to see that in fiscal year 15, we're estimated at 1.9. In fiscal year 16 budget, we've increased that to 2.2 million. It's a result of 2 things. One, our current 2015 bond issue that we just secured and finished. Again, we had some tax exempt as well as a taxable series. And then we have also included in the fiscal year 16 an assumption that with the capital improvement projects that we're going to need to do a 2016 bond issue. So both of those would be driving the increase that is reflected in the fiscal year 15, 1.9 increase to
2016
2.2.
bond issue shouldn't affect 2016.
dependent on the timing difference, we were estimating one interest payment.
So you issued during 2016, your first interest payment's in 2017. Unless you're doing two.
Right, depending on when we do it in fiscal year
Right,
16.
well, just saying.
Right. And if we flip to page 12, page 12 actually just details, and we're showing every single individual debt that we currently have in the general fund. So when you look at the very, very bottom, you see the 1.9, you see the 2.2. You'll actually see all of the future bond issues that we've included as with the amounts, the number of years we're anticipating, as well as the 4% interest rate. And we've only included $40,000 in here in fiscal year 16 budget for a 2016 issue. And again, that would just be dependent upon when we were to issue it, if we would have one interest payment.
Or just cost of issue. Okay.
Which we can no longer amortize.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we're good. Sure. All right.
So again, our expenditures total for fiscal year 16, 42.5 million, with the current estimates in place, which includes the salary and wage estimates. Fiscal year 17 would be a 44 million, which is about 4.3% increase, the majority of which is all on the salary and wages and then the benefit side. We did, just as a note, I want to make sure that I point this out, in the capital transfers to CIP fund, in last year and years prior to that, what had occurred, because we deferred equipment purchases for so long, we would cut and show a smaller amount in the fiscal year 16 budget, but then we would see where in the out years, everybody put in all their requests. What we did was, we really came back and took a look at that and said, you know, realistically, we can't get any better than 1.2 million, even though we have really significant projects. This amount just represents the amount that we would be paying from pay-go funds or paying through general fund operating funds. It does not include any amount that would be through a bond issue. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip us to the CIP section and the capital improvements, just so we can kind of see big picture there. That section is actually section 9. And I'm going to have us turn to page 23. Within the CIP section, we have details on all the funds, all the capital projects, but I'm going to, again, tonight just look at general fund. The schedule on page 23 is just an overview of the projects by department, so we can see what's there in fiscal year 16 as well as the out years. In total, with all these projects in fiscal year 16, we're looking at $13.1 million. The biggest and largest portion of which is within engineering department for a total of $6.4 million. The major projects there, pavement preservation, A&E trail. And for all these projects on this schedule, for those who can't see it, there's also a project number. If you look back, you will actually see detail on those individual projects. So the A&E trail, overall total project that we have in here is a $2 million request. And if we flip to that page, we'll see the different funding sources. The majority of which is going to be bond issue that we just did. That project itself is actually on page 59. So we're looking at about $2,065,000 next year. And 1.5 of that was the bond proceeds, the bond we just secured, as well as some grants and $365,000 that we would transfer from property management. That's the remaining balance of our sale of the Willard Street property for the old Armory building. Again, this schedule is a nice snapshot. It shows you all the projects, it shows you the departments, and from there we can go back and look at the project detail to see the funding sources. But I think the major projects that I want to highlight, so that I can cover the major ones that are included, is, I'm going to have us flip the page to page 50. And that is municipal stadium improvements. And for the stadium improvements, we didn't put anything in or estimate anything improvement-wise until fiscal year 18, and we have $100,000 at that point in time. So if it becomes a priority, or it is a priority for fiscal year 16, at this point I didn't include it in 16. I have everything in the out years for that. Next would be the A&E Trail. And that was on page 59. And we talked about it briefly, $2,065,000 in fiscal year 16 budget. So it is in fiscal year 16. We've identified the funding sources. Again, 1.5 we've already received from our bond. And I think that'll probably, they're still in the design phase for it. Next, I'm going to have us look at page 114. And page 114, the title of this, we just literally have it, Antietam Park. It is the site at which MELP is currently, so we literally say former MELP site. Once we acquire the property, once the building is demolished and our agreement that we have is in place, and we've taken ownership back of that property, we have included an estimated $625,000 in the fiscal year 16 budget to do some sort of park, just so that we had funding in here. Because once that happens and occurs, the assumption is, the next step is we need to do something with it. At this point, we don't have any identified funding sources other than bond financing.
While we're looking at these, I guess I'm trying to figure out in what venue, what setting, at what point is the expectation that we're gonna have that specific conversation about what's in and out. I guess, you're pointing you're pointing me to some projects, and I hear, obviously, staff should be sort of leading in, hey, there's a stadium, do you want to do anything? Yeah, I want to find a better use for it. Here's MELP, here's the funding, do you want to get it down? I sure do. I'm not ready to spend any money on turning it into a park, but I want to get the building down. I guess I'm trying to figure out at what point you're sort of putting it out there to say, council, you're going to have 15 things here. I mean, based on just a simple bit of conversation or correspondence this week, and I've always viewed this sort of urban partners plan and the 8 catalyst projects as sort of, we're going to make the ones happen where we find the partners that want to make them happen with us in the manner and time in which they would like that to occur. And based on even some correspondence this week, I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of love from the partners. And if that's the case, I'm ready to spend the $2 million on something else.
Well, I would
something more
just say
necessary.
that, staff are working really hard.
I understand they are.
And there are regular things that happen throughout negotiations that.
I understand that.
Staff are confident that
But
they're willing partners.
I'm not gonna sit on $1.5 million that improves 2 other property owners' property, if there are other necessary obligations, within this budget to meet, and tax obligations to try and find solution to. I'm just not. So I want to have that conversation, but I don't think it's right here, right now, at this specific moment. I don't know about anybody else.
No, I agree. It would be worthwhile to have a conversation about capital improvement priorities, Mr. Brubaker.
And yes, I've said the same thing since my budget diatribe last year, that we need to come up with what the big major projects are and some way of prioritizing, so we don't come, first served, and certainly, this CIP, we can either go through in detail and try to move things around, or we can say, this is just representative, it's not official. In particular, we haven't authorized these projects.
Isn't that the whole nature of the CIP?
You know, I've said about the trail, I have a lot of qualms about it, a lot of qualms about whether that's one of the first things we ought to be funding, given everything else. And the debt service, you know, but I went ahead with putting the money in the current bond issue because there's 3.7 million of GO bonds proposed for FY16. So if we didn't move ahead, that $1.5 million can be transferred to one or all of some of those projects. That's why I went along with it. And so if we did decide to do it, we'd have it. There's also the 300 and some thousand that's left over from the Army Reserve Center. That's fungible. That can be used for other things too. So I think, you know, we very much need to look at what all the different priorities are, whether you want to take time during this budget process to do that, because it doesn't have a huge effect, very little, if any, on next year. It's the year after it starts to have the impact, FY17.
And I guess for me, you know, we've gotten, you know, update that first third process is working. We're having some success with buildings. And I can tell you right now, just for me, you know, if you got 6 more folks in the door with 6 buildings with you know, partnerships with us on things like college space and you know, whatnot, Marty's word of fungible becomes real relevant for my participation in that type of discussion, because I want to direct our limited funds we have to the successes that we can accomplish in the most timely fashion.
So what I'm hearing and what I think, this is a yearly thing, okay? And what it gets down to is we're now April 21st. We've had in front of us for 3 weeks a proposed budget with a 5-cent tax increase. I know, having been here and worked with my fellow council members long enough, that there is not a lot of love for a 5-cent tax increase. So the question becomes, it looks like we have, what, 3 more meetings before we essentially have to approve the budget for all intents and purposes? So
At least 3.
So when are we going to stop talking, getting a briefing about what's in here, and having the elected bodies start talking about what changes they would like to see in here?
I think to be fair to staff, they want us to have an overview.
I'm not
to understand this.
I'm not at all complaining about what we're getting. The question is, with the time frame that we have, when are we going to start legislative discussions about?
We would anticipate next Tuesday. You've got a
Okay.
special budget work session.
And that's fine, Bruce.
You'll have an answer quicker than that, at least from me.
But I'm talking about when we sit down as a
Okay,
body.
next week, I was aiming to put something out, and then next week we would be there.
That's fine, but if next week is when it's going to actually be
I think
discussed,
what
that's
Michelle's
fine.
trying to do, you adopted goals and priorities in December. So the question should be, did the staff pay any attention to those and do anything in the budget to reflect those goals and priorities? Or how did they reflect those goals and priorities? So I think she's trying to hit the highlights of those projects, those goals and priorities. And then you guys can take it from there.
And that's fine, Bruce. You answered the question. That's the answer to the question.
And tonight really was to be a summary. There's only, and just bear with me, there's 2 more major projects that I just want to bring your attention to for fiscal year 16. So we're going to flip back a page to page 113, downtown redevelopment, $1.5 million. This is not there's no project that's specifically identified for this. Again, we started incorporating this 2 years ago, knowing that there was the goals and the priorities, knowing that we don't necessarily have all these projects identified or these partners identified. We've included this project to kind of help move that along if a project presented and we needed to move. And we're assuming bond financing there. Last but not least, as was already mentioned this evening, our newest project on the general fund side, page 120. It by far, dollar-wise, is not very significant, but it is called Public Art. It's $25,000. And the idea here was, in several meetings, we're hearing this idea and concept that this is something that everybody at this table is very supportive and wishes to see more of.
Can we beg the paper not to make this the headline? It's 25,000 bucks, in a, tens of millions of dollar budget. It's an item, but it clearly isn't the item.
Correct. And the thought here would be that it would be almost a 50-50 partnership, that there would be contribution from others.
There was enthusiasm after the
And
bear
it's-
sculpture. We
correct.
modeled this after that project.
Correct.
But once
Think that
again, it may not last. Michelle, the other
there's-
one is the Massey property.
There's three major ones, and I want to bring us our attention, three that I can think of. There is nothing in here specifically that says Maryland Theater. You're not going to see that in here. Also, there's nothing in here in Academic Hub. Last but not least, there is nothing in here that says Massey property. So no funding, no expenditures, nothing identified in this proposed budget. Again, just trying to give you an overview of general fund revenue, expenditures, the
But
the
there is
major
$1.5 million
exposures.
of what I call holding.
Downtown, correct.
Holding a place.
That could apply to every
Correct,
one of
for
those.
one that's not identified.
Holding a place.
I agree.
You have
Yes.
to be careful.
Can you explain just real quick on public art, what is, for it says expenditures, equipment, vehicles, furnishings, what does that have to do with public art?
It's,
Is that just a
it's a
category?
category within this
Broad
software,
category?
furnish, yes.
Okay.
There's nothing there like this
There's none-
statue art.
There's
We
no-
could call it other, but we really hate to
Okay.
use that term, other.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But again, just to give an overview, so this budget includes a proposed 5-cent tax rate increase, and it includes it in fiscal year 16. Even with the 5-cent tax rate increase, and looking at fiscal year 17, you will notice that I've identified that it will still result in a deficit or a shortage of about $1.2 million. If salaries and wages are increased, if we do not see big growth in our assessable base and our revenue property dollars, and if there are no other changes and we wish to keep these projects as a priority and move forward.
Well, and on that score, let me just chime in. We wrestled with how to balance this budget a lot. In the message, we give you alternatives. There's actually an easier way to balance the budget than raising the tax rate. And we could have chosen that approach if all our goal was to avoid a tax rate increase for you guys to wrestle with and for us as a city. We just felt that if we were going to strengthen our operations, try to position ourselves for the future, given the information we have on projections for wages and benefits and assessed values, we plugged in the 5 cents. We could have avoided that 5-cent increase and presented a balanced budget for you by a combination of other adjustments. We just didn't see those adjustments as improving things for us, either improving our operations, strengthening our operations, or providing resources for future wage and benefit adjustments, if you want to do that. So that was our thinking in the 5 cents. It strengthens us, it stabilizes our budget, it makes us a little bit more sustainable. It doesn't answer all the questions, but there in some ways are easier choices for a council and for staff to simply just make adjustments and assumptions on operating accounts to avoid the tax rate increase. It gets back to what Councilmember Alshire said and what we've been wrestling with for years here. The growth in our wages and benefits, $28 million in this year's budget, compared to the $28 million in property tax revenue, the growth in wages and benefits exceeds the growth in our property tax. So we have a structural imbalance in our general fund. We've offset that some years by eliminating positions. At one point, you'll remember we eliminated, I think it was 53, 54 positions. We still have 24 of those unfunded. We added some new revenues with the safe zone a safe school zone program to help support our public safety operations. Public safety is probably half of the general fund expenditures. So as you think of expenditures in the general fund, roughly half is police and fire. I think that's a reasonable estimate, Michelle, or roughly. So we strengthened our funding for those operations with that program. So we've made adjustments all along the way. But that's the, I'll say, either the dilemma or the challenge or the opportunity that we have. Do we want to strengthen our finances for the future, or do we simply want to try to get by this year and next year without a tax rate increase and hope that things get better with the assessed values? And so we chose the tax rate
Let me ask you a
increase.
follow-up question. If we don't raise taxes, no one here wants to raise taxes.
Yeah,
I've
nobody
got
wants to
very
do
clear.
that, including, we didn't want to recommend it.
I'm sure you didn't. The alternative is to spend reserves, right?
Or, yeah, you can draw down your reserves, we can cut capital, we can defer purchases, we can defer equipment, we can tell department heads they have to cut expenditures, we can cut out the public works position, but I don't see any of those things particularly beneficial in terms of strengthening our operations. And maybe we're not in a position where we can do that. Maybe we just have to say, we have to hunker down and make those kind of adjustments to get by. But I think we can do it on a combination of the expenditure adjustments and drawing down reserves. One of the policy questions for the council is, do you want to go below the GFOA recommendation on reserves?
No, that's
And,
not acceptable.
and so we put a new chart in your budget to help you see where we stand on that, but that's going to be one of the questions. The other question is, we don't know how you're going to fund the Massey project right now. So we know that's a priority, that's become a top priority in terms of timing, and we didn't have time, we were wrapping this up on March 15th, so that was evolving at about the same time finance was finalizing the budget. So we didn't get that in here. So that's an unknown for us.
Okay, so if we use our reserves, and cut a few of these things that you've just talked about, am I right in assuming that at some point, if property values continue to fall, then at some point, we're going to have to replenish the reserves, because there won't be any reserves that we could depend on, as well as increase taxes
We're not going.
at some point, a large amount to catch up with programs and stuff. Maybe 18, 19, but at some point, it's gonna come due, isn't it?
Well, I think it depends on the choices. You've also got the choice of telling staff it's time to start reducing programs and services. We've never done that. We've scaled back expenditures, but we've always maintained core services and operations, and I think that's a tribute to the department heads to find a way of doing that. So I think Councilmember Munson, it's the choices of how you want to position the budget. There's other opportunities for expenditure reductions here. I just didn't see those as making things better or positioning the mayor and council and the staff in the future with a better position on the budget. So you could probably get by next year without that tax rate increase. You might be able to skimp by in your 4th year of your term without a tax rate increase. But you're gonna have to hope that those assessed values are really recovering quickly and more strongly than what we're seeing. And as I said, I'm being more optimistic on the projected growth in assessed values than finance probably wanted to be. The other thing we haven't done this year is we haven't inflated capital expenditures in the projections. We kept it at a flat 1.2 million, which was kind of our base level of capital expenditures that we've tried to maintain. There's been a lot of years where we've been a lot lower than that. So you may want to go back to capital expenditures and start dropping them down in the general fund.
And the only downside that where the struggle really picked up was, yes, that's our Band-Aid and that fixes and that's easy for fiscal year 16. But what does that do and what position does that put us in for fiscal year 17? And if we've done these one-time cuts or defer any of our projects again, we've done that for years. And the reason why we can't get it below $1 million in pay-go for fiscal year 16 is for that very reason. We've deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred. So at some point, that all catches up to you. So we could defer again for another year.
Move, we hear from Martin.
Mr. Brubaker.
I don't think it's easy, by the way. You said there'd be an easy thing to do.
I think it's more easy in terms of the
And I don't think
public.
anybody's proposing that we consciously weaken the government. I think we have to, at a time, enough is enough. I said it last year. I said we needed a 3-year plan to get us through this tax cycle. And if we can't, and if in January 17, the new estimates do not fund us, we have to restructure this whole government, in my opinion, because we can't sustain. But I think we can sustain for a couple of years. And that's what I propose. And I don't, I said last year 11 cents was it for me. I could have cut that last year, but I thought, well, at 11 cents, we can sustain. Staff's done a good job. It's an easy-to-use budget. There's lots of information. It's not critical of that. So you make different balances about the taxpayer versus the strength of the city government. And I think we owe things to the taxpayer as well. You know, I certainly, all these things, most of the things that are brought to us are good to do. They're nice to do. But you realize the budget's calling for another 5 cents next year. That puts us way beyond any other major jurisdiction. We're already going to be at the top or near the top of the very highest in the state. And the county is our main competitor in terms of attracting tax base. So I think there are real issues of, and number one, we have to show the ability to restrain this budget, to restrain the government a little bit. I'm a good moderate Democrat. I believe government's a force for good. I don't have any ideological things. But it's at some point, enough's enough. And I think the new city administration will have a year and a half to look at reorganizing, changing our benefits, doing a number of things. They're going to have to be done because it isn't sustainable past 2 years. But last year, I thought we would be able to get through this without a major restructuring, which nobody seemed to has the appetite for. And I still think we can. So I will pass this out, and it'll be a conversation starter, okay?
He's giving us homework.
What? Can I have one too?
You will. Okay.
Thank you.
And what I'd like to do is just go through, I don't think
Do you
we
have
should
one more for
discuss
the
it
clerk?
in detail. Sure.
Never mind, we got one here. Thanks, Penny.
We don't have to discuss it in detail. I figured, I wanted to get it in people's heads before next week when we have the 4 o'clock, right? And I'll explain the thinking behind this. It adds up to 1.2 million. That's about what we need, right? About that. And it's no particular order. The new public works supervisor, you know, I'm sure that the position, you know, a lot of positions could probably be justified. I just think we can't do it. This is no time to be adding to the workforce. Position lapse. That's either one and slightly more or one very top management position or a lot of small ones. That's vacancies, holding vacancies open. You could do one very large one or a lot of small ones, but the city manager would administer that. Reduce the CIP general fund contribution. That 100,000 is out of $1 million and 23 projects. Many of them are the small ones, the kinds of things we were talking about today in the last few weeks. And that's why I've been so stubborn about nice to do things, because you prove that, and then you go to the budget and you take other things out. So I don't think it's fair not to put them in the competition. So again, that 100,000 is out of $1 million and 23 projects. Reduced economic development contribution. The First Third program has 500,000 budgeted. You could take 400,000 out of that. There's 200,000 or 300,000. I wasn't sure. I think it's 200,000.
200 from general.
200 from general fund. That's what I have in my notes. 200. And so that's cutting that. But I would like to explore being able to put some of that bond money in there.
Economic redevelopment.
Yes. And to cover that, remove the general fund money. We could even get 200,000 out. These figures can move some, but I'm trying to show you a way to get there. Reduce police overtime. When we approved the school enforcement zones, we were told that we would increase police productivity and reduce police overtime. The overtime has not happened. We've increased staffing. I think there's one proposed vacancy all year in the police department, and that includes people leaving and coming back. So one's going to occur just naturally. That never materialized. Reduction in overtime due to the school zones and due to court appearances not being necessary and so forth. But we were specifically promised that. Same with fire, 100,000. Bring fund balance to fiscal policy level, and I said over 2 years. Bruce had a very nice chart, thank you for showing 750,000, I believe, would bring us down, and Dawn, I want you to hear this. That brings us to the GF, Government Finance Officers Association recommended level.
Right.
So and it does it over 2 years, not 1 year, so that just brings us down. A lot of municipalities would be glad to have that 16.9.
Of course, I understand.
So that's what I'm taking here, and I realize that we'll be having a discrepancy, or we'll be having less in expenditures that, our revenues could appear to be less than our expenditures, and we'll be using fund balance. As I said last year, we talk with our finance people. You call them up and say, we've got to get through these 2 years. We've got to get through, and we've got to keep this government, at a size that we can tolerate, and that's where we need to go. So I think everybody has to realize that if after 2 years we haven't been able, the tax base hasn't turned back up, there are much more drastic measures than this will have to occur. That needs to be recognized next summer. Maintain police and fire contribution at the FY15 actual level. I'm saying just maintain it, don't increase it.
How do you
That's
do that?
it.
Well, I'm sorry,
All right.
no, we shouldn't be discussing it tonight.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you do it by not increasing the reserve as much as we would have otherwise. They still get the retirement, there's no threat to retirement.
I
So,
understand.
instead of the reserve going up a couple percentage points, which I have always supported strongly. But I'm saying these are the times to
No, I
try men's
understand.
souls.
I
There's a
understand.
time, most other governments have gone much stronger than this. We're still conservative, in my opinion. So that adds up to $1 million too. You could play around with some of these, get more or less. You could do some other things, but I was looking for the tax amount, and it's over 2 years. All these things can be done both years, as far as I'm concerned. So, they're not one-time
And
items.
then, so this replaces the 5 cents.
Yes.
Then in FY17, you'll have another 1.2 to work on, right? Because you've got a shortfall of 1.2 million in 17 with the 5 cent increase.
Well.
So just,
Well,
looking at it for the 2 years.
I'll bring that in then, if that's,
Because the figure for 17 would need to be 2.4, I think, based on our projections. Am I saying that right, Michelle?
Correct.
Well, let me,
Got us partway there.
Right,
And,
right. But I just want to make sure
I
the council
can't-
understood this doesn't
But if we
address
pass
17.
this budget this way, we're still 5 cents next year. So if we have, we'll face it when we get there. Or I'll go back in and get another one.
Marty, I appreciate the effort and time you put and work you put into this. It's something concrete. It's something that we can take a serious look at. Some other stuff that we've been suggested to us over the years, you couldn't make any sense of it because it was not concrete enough, but this list is. And it's worth reviewing. And I would hope that at some point you all could come back here prepared to discuss the implications of each and every one of these.
That'd be a question I have. Would you want next week to have, I mean, we can certainly share this with all the department heads. Would you want them to come in next week to talk through with council? They may say, yeah, we can do this, we can reduce police overtime by 200, or here's an alternative, or here's my reaction as the chief to that suggestion. Would you want to have
I
department
think
heads?
that's necessary. I mean, there's something, yeah, because there's some things here that, I mean, listen, we got $300,000 of recommendations that there's not a person in the world who would object to, and that's reduction of overtime costs.
Yeah.
So the question becomes now is hearing from the chiefs, how they get there.
Yeah, the
Because
impact.
you couldn't find a more popular item to do, and I don't disagree, and I would again tell you, I don't know how you do it, and I don't know, I would love to know how much overtime cost is attributed to court time. Because I gotta tell you, in the criminal justice system, the state's attorney's office does not care. Our officers spend days in district court for no reason at all, and in circuit court for no reason at all. They will sit there for hours for no reason at all. What do I mean for no reason at all? They're subpoenaed to appear. The case has either been a plea agreement from day one, or it's a continuance from day one, and they'll sit down there for hours because the state's attorney's office doesn't care, mainly because I will assume they're like everybody else understaffed, so they're worried about their own budget, not having somebody take care of somebody else's budget. But, and I have to tell you, if you told me.
Well, let's have the chief come in, because
Right.
I can't answer
Yeah,
your
no, I know
questions.
you can't, but these are the kind of answers I want. If I had one officer who wrote a speeding ticket, one speeding ticket, and was being subpoenaed to district court for overtime to testify that speeding ticket, I'd tell him not to come.
Well, again, we were told.
So,
when we approved the
right, so
speed cameras
I
that
think
that
the
would be
answer is
reduced.
yes.
Yeah, and just as a frame of reference, and it's on page 9 and in section 7, overtime in the general fund has been running for the last 4 years at roughly $1 million.
Correct.
That's with more police officer positions
1,010,000.
filled and an increased number of police
Yeah,
officers.
that's frustrating.
So we're increasing the number of positions, we're filling the positions, which the mayor and council wanted us to do. Overtime's still pretty flat.
And
So we'll have the chief come in and help explain that, but it's not increasing with more positions.
And what we had done in the fiscal year 15 budget was we had done just that, but when we did our
It
fiscal year
should.
15 mid-year review, I think the comment that I took most to heart and I notated was that this council made the comment, don't budget if you can't hit that mark. We should put the overtime to where they're actually at, so that
And my point
was the
is,
reason.
we've got to figure out a way to do something. We
And you're-
can't infinitely raise the tax rate and have the employees, citizens, and the bargaining units think, those elected officials, they're just gonna raise the tax rate every time, and that's the road we're headed down, and we can't do it. So if we don't like these solutions, I think we need to find others.
Certainly a good jumping off
And
point.
by the way,
Further
this is-
discussion.
This is good stuff to have.
The public safety cuts are less than the proportion of the public safety budget in the general fund.
Well, if
In other words,
it,
the cuts are proportionally less to public safety in this.
so if it helps you, we'll share this with staff, which we would do, and then we'll have staff come in to help discuss the impacts or if there's an
Sounds great,
alternative
Bruce.
or a better idea,
Mm-hmm.
or a twist on this. Let's work on balancing the budget starting next
That's
week.
what it's all about.
I too want to commend Councilmember Brubaker for his efforts on taking a hard look at these numbers and trying to bring us some things to consider.
Hey, listen, there's a bunch of us who really appreciate council members Alshire and Brubaker. They are the voice of the budget for us.
One thing I want to make clear is whichever way the downtown trail goes in terms of future, people will hit all of us and say, why don't you just cut that out? That solves the problem. It does not, because most of that money is bond funded. It has a impact next year, but, not any kind of huge impact. And if we did not do it, those bond monies would be needed for other more, less glamorous projects. So, it can be used. So the 1.5 is not available and would not solve that.
Well, and it's in a bond sale that's been approved.
Right.
So there are some, as Michelle told me this morning, when I was asking, how easy is it to shift money out of that? We'd have to talk to our bond counsel.
You
She
can
was saying.
And we-
transfer to other geo-eligible projects.
And we can.
You can.
We can.
Give
It
it
has to
back.
be
You can.
reprogrammed. We have to do some more, passing of ordinances, but it would have to be tax exempt eligible projects.
Sure.
Because it's a tax
You
exempt
have
bond.
three-
And we have that money.
3.8 million
Yes.
program for next year. If
In
we
the general
can't-
fund.
In the general fund, bond issue. So if we can't find it in that, something's wrong with it.
A good discussion for next week.
Marty, let me just say this, that I don't have any trouble with the fund balance, bring fund balance to fiscal policy level, as long as we have a standard, which is the general standard throughout the state. That's not, I don't see that as a problem. It's nice to be above that standard, but.
It's a nationwide standard.
So we have to have an opportunity to go fairly easy.
Bottom line is, we've had First Share for 20 years, and during that 20 years, we have built up a reserve fund that you should be commended for. I have to tell you, and up until about a year or two ago, that reserve fund, our city administrator, no way we could touch it. And when it was needed to be touched, when it was appropriate to be touched, which is in the last couple of years, it has been.
And I always supported that.
And I know that, Martin. No, I'm
And now I'm
commending.
saying we are at that
I'm
crisis point,
commending.
in my opinion. Now,
I'm-
maybe in others, that's.
No, I'm commending everybody for having us in a position where we did not use those kinds of monies when we did not have to. And I don't disagree with you. With an 11-cent tax increase last year and impending budget issues, I see that as an alternative. I see, and I think it's a much more difficult situation, but it's been stated here enough tonight for me to have heard it. Ultimately, we need to get a handle on our personnel budget, or we have real problems, and I'm not sure how we do that.
Well, yeah, to me, it's reorganization.
Yeah, right.
And changes in benefits, and I hate to send that signal, but there's no other way unless and we all have been working hard on trying to do the tax assessable base. Everybody realizes that. It's
Well,
not-
and you know what my problem is with that. I've had that problem from day one. Everybody talks about tax base, I talk about taxes. So, if it were me, I would like to see the tax base go up so we could cut the tax rate. Because to me, I've never really understood it. I've never understood the tax rate issue. My issue has always been, what do you write the check out for taxes? And just so we know, we had an 11-cent tax increase last year. My wife tells me our real estate taxes in my house were less last year than they were the year before. And that is because of the devaluation of the property. So, you raise the tax rate and people aren't paying substantially more taxes. It's a frustrating thing for me. But I know that is what everybody in the world looks at, is a tax rate. They don't look at what the average person pays in taxes. They don't compare what Montgomery County person pays in real estate taxes to what Washington County person pays in real estate taxes. They compare the tax rates. And it's a joke when you have a property that's assessed 5 times the amount that somebody else's property is, and they're paying a less tax rate, they're paying much more in taxes.
But investors, when they.
I understand.
The investors, the homeowners, but there's investors, and they look, I've got to pay twice as much.
I understand. I'm not arguing the point with you. So it'd be interesting to see if we can get to where we want to get to.
Hey Lou, I'm going to repeat the obvious. All politics is local, and it starts with either a wallet or a pocketbook. Yeah.
No question.
Well, that brings us to the city administrator comments.
None for me this evening.
Council comments, Mr. Metzner.
It's always the least favorite time of the year. You have choices between telling citizens essentially you're going to raise their taxes, or telling staff that they may have cuts, or telling the public that popular projects aren't going to go the way you would like to see them. But I commend staff. I think staff has done exactly what they should do. They listen to what our priorities are throughout the year, and they come up with a budget that says, listen, if you want to sustain the city and you want to get your priorities that you told us, this is what you need to do. And now it's our job to say to staff, either that's great, or that we as a legislative body have to change some of our priorities in order to get to another priority, which is the tax rate. And I commend everybody, and it's just like what we went through tonight with these $5,000 requests. They're all great requests. And when you say no, you have the feeling that people are looking at you thinking you're speaking poorly of their request, but it's the pocketbook.
Thanks, Mr. Brubaker.
The MML Legislative Committee tomorrow is scheduled to meet with Governor Hogan, the new Transportation Secretary, and Mr. Brinkley, the Budget Secretary. So we'll try to get our points across to the extent, and at least be able to hold our own in the upcoming sessions.
Thanks. Ms. Nye.
Tell Brinkley I said hi.
I will.
And he owes me one.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
do that, I'll do that.
Okay.
Mr. Munson.
I have several things. First, I would like to, and I think on behalf of the mayor and council, commend Rob Havermail for running the Boston Marathon and achieving his personal best in that race. He's obvious, as most everybody knows, the principal of the School for the Arts. Secondly, I drive up and down Antietam Street, and every time I do, I view with great anticipation the disassembly of the fire building over there, and it's happening. They're down to about 1 story now, and it's not going to be long before it's going to be a beautiful sight. Third, I got a telephone call from a constituent not long ago, and Penny, you'll be particularly interested in this. This is a lady who has engaged in the sales in the barns there from the very beginning. Probably a lady that you know. There have been some changes made at the fairground, which I don't believe council was told about. Perhaps we didn't have any reason to know it. A road was taken out which does not allow these people who handle the merchandise to get near their stalls anymore. They are expected to park at a certain place, and then they have to get a cart and haul all their stuff down to the stalls. And then when they're finished at the end of the day, they have to get a cart and haul all their stuff up. And this is several trips for most of them. And it's very tiring, and most of them are senior citizens. Now, they're very upset about this. In fact, this particular lady has discontinued her activities at the fairground, and therefore not paying the rental income, which we certainly can use. And in addition to that, the there's grass in front of those stalls that goes up the hill there. They have been told that they can't park in that grass, that it's against the law or something. And they have to park at a particular place some distance away. And they were initially told too by someone, and I don't know who, that nobody was going to park in that grass because it was killing the grass. But yet, at the last sale they had, or last activity they had over there, all the customers parked in the grass. I think, frankly, if they want to, if somebody's trying to shut down sales at the fairground, this is gonna happen as a result of this. There aren't very many people who are going to haul their merchandise for a good city block back and forth when they're 70 or 75 years old. So I would hope that that would be looked into and to the extent possible rectified. I mean, I don't see any problem with people pulling their cars down, their vehicles down to those stables, unloading their merchandise, and then go park someplace. But the inability to get their merchandise from the parking place to the stables is really a bad thing.
I'm not familiar with that change, but I'll check with staff.
I appreciate it. And finally, I want to say this. With regard to the A&E Trail land acquisition, there was a little implication, and probably not meant to be, that it might not happen. But I want to say this, and I want to say it loud and clear. I want the public to hear this, because there is no reason at this point to believe it won't happen. And that's all I want to say about it, except it's high priority among thousands of people in this county, and they need to understand and not be scared of what has been implied here this evening.
Ms. Nye, thanks, Mr. Mills. Ms. Nye.
All I want to say is, after 11:30 at night, people beware of, if you have valuables sitting on your porches. There has been now 3 homes that have had valuable urns taken from their porches. We're talking in the thousands. That's been within the last 2 weeks. I don't know if there's been an update with any more or not. It's just the beginning of now the start of spring again, but there's somebody that's pretty crafty with this one, because they are actually combing the areas, and we're talking the south end of town, the north end of town, and the east end of town. And it's pretty significant. And again, you just have to keep on guard. So I wished I knew. I'm about ready to do citizen's arrest. I've had enough. Honestly, it's a matter of going out and actually going through your neighborhoods late at night if you're not a working person the next day. And this is what you have to do. I mean, the police have got their hands full enough as it is, and this is how you have to protect your neighborhoods. You have to become involved. And for those who think that, hey, it's just a police thing, it's not. And I mean, when you get to the point that you have this, you know, I've had thefts before on mine that they virtually walked up on my porch, but we're not talking the kind of thefts like this. These people are very select in what they're doing, so I don't know what the next thing will be.
Thanks.
That's it.
Well, I just wanted to note, I know several of us attended the Celebration of Business last week, and it was really nice to see, especially all the businesses from Hagerstown that are celebrating 10, 25, 30, 40, and even 125 years in business. So I want to congratulate all those businesses and thank the Washington County Department of Business Development for putting on that fine event and for recognizing those businesses. The other thing is, last week I got to welcome a group of students from Basel, Germany here at City Hall, and then I know Councilmember Brubaker and Mr. Zimmerman attended the dinner at the church for them on Thursday night, which was also the opening game for the Hagerstown Suns, and I believe they're they're doing okay so far, and hopefully people will start filling up the stands, but I was glad to be one of the people throwing out the first pitch there, and wish them all the best. We also celebrated the end of our 100-miler. The Hub City 100-miler has concluded and had a great turnout for the event there. I'm still jealous I didn't win one of those bicycles because they looked really nice and I need a new bike. Also wanted to acknowledge staff's involvement in the showing of the Lincoln movie at the Bridge of Life Church to celebrate, I don't know if it's a celebration, but to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. I know that also last Friday night was the Holocaust Remembrance at the synagogue, and I want to recognize that too as an annual reminder of what has happened in history, and so that it never happens again. And also want to thank the United Way yesterday for having me and staff to a meeting that they have quarterly with executives of various organizations that are part of the United Way. We talk a lot about the issue that we have with nonprofits, and sometimes that term can be very loosely interpreted and everybody takes that personally, but I think when it comes to who the United Way works with, a lot of those organizations are fine and have nothing to do with what the issues we're focusing on, and the ones of greatest concern to us are not a member of the United Way. So it's good to continue that conversation with these groups. We're going to continue that with smaller groups of these organizations as time goes on, and just want to keep everyone updated on that. It was also a pleasure to welcome the Maryland, all the leaders of the arts and entertainment districts from around the state of Maryland to Hagerstown yesterday. Since we were the 2014 awardee of the Arts and Entertainment District of the Year, the annual meeting was held here in Hagerstown yesterday, and they gave the award for this year, 2015, to Salisbury. So I congratulate my colleague, Mayor Ireton, and the good folks in Salisbury for their hard work and efforts. Last but not least, very excited about the launch of the Main Street Hagerstown tomorrow at the Fletcher Library, 7 p.m. In the community room, and I think it's going to, I anticipate there will be a great turnout and look forward to a lot of good things to come for that. And just in case you didn't know, I happened to see it in the elevator here at City Hall. But there is another meeting on Thursday evening to talk about the financial benefits of historic preservation. So if you live in a historic district or you own a building in a historic district in Hagerstown, this is something I've been asking staff to do more outreach, to educate homeowners and potential property owners about the financial benefits of living in historic preservation districts, as well as other ways that they can access assistance in improving their properties. So, sure, that's Thursday the 23rd at 6:30 at the library. So that's all I got. We will be adjourned. Thank you.